Recording in progress.
Please? How dare you?
All set? Okay, thanks. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Select Board meeting, June 29th. Before we get started, if everyone would rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. I think that, so to start, we have public comment. We do have on our agenda later, the third item on our agenda is the discussion on the stand-up paddleboard program. And if people have public comment about that, it may be better to make those comments when we have that conversation, if that's okay with folks that are here, if they're commenting on that. I'd welcome public comment on any other matters now, if people have public comment unrelated to that. I don't see any on Zoom, and if people have public comment, which it would help if I open my laptop, they can also email me at nduffy@swampscottma.gov.
We had someone on Zoom.
Okay. Tasia, if you can allow her to talk. Yep. Tasia, are you there? There she is.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, hi, thank you for allowing me to speak. I am resident on Lewis Road, and I am here because I'm concerned about the parking situation at the beaches. I know we recently gave out hundreds of parking passes to town employees, and I'm not sure the exact number. I know many of them already live in town, but I do know that a lot of them also live outside of town. And I was at Phillips Beach this weekend. Very, very, very difficult to find parking. The only way I was able to park is I actually had my mother with me who's disabled, and we were able to use one of the handicap spots. There are 2 handicap spots now. Previously, there was only 1. So I'm really glad to see that a second was added. But I can tell you that her experience is that she still struggles to get a handicap spot there when she goes alone. And she wanted to drive with me because she has such a hard time finding parking there on a regular basis too. So I'm concerned that we gave out all these parking stickers. We didn't add any parking to compensate for that. And I know that there's a lot of areas in that neighborhood that are designated as resident, but I'd like, to have it considered that they be opened up to add more beach parking. And I'd also like to get some more information about our Commission on Disability. My understanding is we don't have one right now, and that is really disappointing because I think it serves such an important purpose. And, you just don't know what it's like to walk in someone's shoes when they're disabled. And the struggles, I have 2 disabled parents. It's very, very, very challenging for disabled people. So I don't know what we need to do to get that commission back up and going, but I'd like to see that made a priority.
Okay, thank you, Tasia. Thank you very much for your comments. Is there anyone else here who has public comment unrelated to the stand-up paddleboard? Okay. So with that, we have exciting presentation to give. We have some Girl Scouts here who we are recognizing for their amazing work to create a bird blind in the Harold King Forest, and they've achieved a Girl Scout Silver Award. We've got Juliette, Hale, and Elinor Swirski. So you both, if you want to come down here, you can. There's a microphone here you can speak to. We'd love to learn more about your projects and congratulate you on your work. If you have something, you can either sit here or you can use that microphone there, whichever you feel more comfortable with.
So over COVID, is this on? Yes. So over COVID, we started doing a lot of bird watching, and we came across a forestry report from the state of Massachusetts, and that suggested a bird blind to be installed into the Harold King Forest. So we approached the Swampscott Conservancy and the Conservation Commission and got their approval to build and install a bird blind in the Harold King Forest.
We then teamed up with Wolf Builders to install the bird blind in the forest. We added some informational signs to the blind that promote the use of citizen science in Swampscott, and then we led a guided hike throughout the forest. And that's basically what we did.
That's great. Well, I would mention that this is in addition to all the work that you did in Harold King Forest last year, which was, marking the trails and just making that even a more enjoyable experience for all our residents. So I thank you both and all the Girl Scouts for all your work. I welcome the board to comment.
No, I absolutely love the fact that the Girl Scouts and Juliette and Elinor, you're everything that's right about Swampscott and giving back and volunteering. And I was extremely pleased last summer when I was able to speak at the opening of the Ridge Trail. That was incredibly exciting. This is now incredibly exciting that we're investing and continue to invest in open space, and we have incredible volunteers such as the two of you in front of us. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can you just describe what a bird blind is and how long it took you, how many hours you put in, and what your efforts were, so we have a good understanding of how hard you worked?
Well, a bird blind is a structure that allows you to observe birds in their natural habitat, but with disturbing them a little bit less, so it makes you a little more hidden. And the outlines for the Silver Award is that you have to put in 50 hours of work total, and that includes building and researching and making signs and leading guided tours and all that.
Yeah.
And are those your awards that you're wearing?
Yes.
These here.
Thank you.
Good job.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Silver Award? How important is that award?
The Silver Award is the highest achievement that we can gain at our current level of Girl Scouts. There's 3 main awards. There's the Bronze Award, which we've already done, and the Silver Award and the Gold Award. And they progressively get harder and harder, and you have to put in more and more hours and have more requirements as they go on.
That's great. Thank you so much. If there aren't further comments, it's my pleasure to present to you both an official citation of appreciation from the town of Swampscott in recognition of your Girl Scout Silver Award and for your hard work and dedication working on the Harold King Forest Bird Blind Project. So these are signed certificates from the board and by the town administrator to Elinor Swirski and Juliette Hale. So thank you very much.
Why don't we just recess for like a...
Yeah, we'll take a 2-minute break and take some pictures. Cool. If you want to come over here. Bring it
Gonna
on.
see some gold stars?
Yeah, we should. Hopefully before September, because they're all going off to college. But we have at least two
Awesome.
that should be coming through. So
It's awesome.
thank you so much. We're gonna move to.
Thank you.
You
Thanks
guys
for coming.
can stay. It's civics, you know. Gotta be a badge for that.
Have a great night. Thanks. So, with that, it's just about 6:30, so I think we will, the next thing on our agenda is a public hearing for a liquor license that's scheduled for 6:30, so I think we'll jump into that discussion. This is for a transfer of license from Yan's China Bistro to Thai-rific by the Sea, located at 146 Humphrey Street, Swampscott, Mass. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so is this going to you, Sean, or?
Yes, this is essentially just a transfer of a liquor license. It's a new business, and Angelica is here from the police department. If the board has any questions, the property lies in a B1 zoning district on Humphrey Street. The property is within 200 feet of both the Hadley and St. John's Church. As past precedent shows, the property has existed as a restaurant with a full liquor license and may maintain that use through the transfer of business without needing to obtain a special permit before the ZBA. The staff has reviewed this, both Marzi Galaska and Chief Quesada, and with regard to the outdoor dining, the current temporary zoning law allows for outdoor seating as of right, including liquor service for all restaurants in town, whether permitted as of right by special permit. Applicant has not yet applied for neither the common victular license or entertainment license. The Office of Community and Economic Development has reviewed the application and finds that its local business fits our goals in the master plan, and we continue to grow our local businesses with a variety of dining experiences. Oh, sorry.
Okay, do I have any questions from the board on this transfer of license? Is there any public comment on this liquor license? I'm assuming to see his hand is not for this. It's gone. And so do I have a motion then to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and so, given that, I don't know if there's any further discussion of the board, or if I would entertain a motion to approve the transfer of license from Yan's China Bistro to Thai-rific.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. That was easy. I think if it is okay, I'm going to try to do a couple of items on the agenda out of order to knock them down before we enter the stand-up paddleboard program, just because I think that will be a lengthy discussion, and see maybe if we can get through some of these other items that might not take as long. So one of those, let's see. The first would be, I think, the item number 7, which is Aggregate Industries earth removal permit extension. This is a request. The earth removal permit is up at the end of this month, and the Earth Removal Advisory Committee has submitted some questions that have not yet been answered, and they haven't been able to provide a recommendation. They don't have a recommendation to us for their next permit, so they're requesting that we extend the permit until they're able to do a full review and get answers to some questions that they still have pending with Aggregate. I don't know, Sean, if you want to add anything to that? Or?
Just that I think a 90-day extension would give us time to continue to meet with Aggregate and discuss ways that we can ultimately settle on some concerns that they've presented. We feel strongly, though, that we've got permit conditions that vastly improve our regulatory standard that we've had we made these changes last year, and I think, you know, they should continue to govern the operations of the quarry.
Any questions on any of this from anyone? Nope. Okay, so do I have a motion to extend the current earth removal permit for Aggregate Industries by 90 days?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, great. I think that I would like to also see if we can do item 9, which is vote to accept the recommendation of the town administrator to appoint counsel. This is something that we need to approve. The town administrator is recommending that we he may want to appoint counsel for assistance with both the land acquisitions and easement acquisitions that we are pursuing. And so we need to approve that recommendation.
This is Attorney George McLaughlin, renowned attorney that specializes in land use in Massachusetts, and certainly will allow us to, you know, get the type of legal support that will best address the needs of the town at this time.
I'd make a motion to appoint the McLaughlin Brothers PC as special counsel to assist the town of Swampscott in connection with representation regarding the acquisition of various parcels of land.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, right. Okay, so I think, unless anyone else feels otherwise, I think the other items on our agenda are significant enough conversation, so maybe we should go back in order and talk about the stand-up paddleboard program, if that's okay. So for folks who are here to comment on that, I think what would be most productive is maybe we have a conversation about it, and then we allow you to make your comment after that discussion, because maybe some answers to questions will be provided, hopefully, and some issues will be addressed, maybe not. Maybe more questions will come up, but I think that may be the best way to do it. So that's the way I think we'll proceed. We've put this on the agenda. Many people know that the Swampscott Stand-Up Paddleboard summer program with an outside vendor has been was canceled somewhat abruptly, I think a little over a week ago. I want to just acknowledge the upset of that. I think we all understand, some of us firsthand, how disruptive that is for families and children and residents in general to have something like that go away and having that expectation. I'm not far removed at all from having to try to program a child's summer, and I appreciate the stress that's involved with that task, as well as the enjoyment of finding something that fits so well, especially when it's nearby and convenient and affordable. And so I think we all know that that's not a small thing to lose. And I think it's important. So one of the reasons I think it's important to have this on the agenda tonight is have a conversation about what occurred and provide some clarity for people on that piece, but also talk about, some plans, sort of how we're going to avoid such issues going forward, and looking ahead to summers of the future. I'd prefer this not to devolve into an inquisition, if you will, but I think that it's important to have some clarity for everyone that has been somewhat absent for I think residents. So I think that it's important that we have a conversation about that. And so with that, I'm going to let the town administrator provide an update to start, and then I think the board can provide their comments and ask questions, and then we will open it up to some public comment and questions.
Thank you, Neil. I certainly want to start by just acknowledging just how difficult this has been on a number of families in Swampscott, and how I think disappointed we all are that, you know, something that we've worked to build over the last few years has just, evaporated and left us all wondering, you know, frankly, what we could have done better to ensure that we didn't create such a disruption. The last 2 years, have been very, very difficult for every family. And I think it's important for all of us to kind of just understand that, we would never in a million years want to see a program like this not get stronger and stronger. And, unfortunately, we we made some mistakes, and we communicated some things to a vendor that, made them feel as though we would not accommodate the program. And unfortunately, the changes were too abrupt, and we didn't have enough of an opportunity to work out a solution. I do want to make it clear to everyone that, the town would have taken whatever steps reasonably, necessary to continue to support the container and to continue to try to support the program. I recognize that just, at some point was just a little bit too little and too late. We do have some dedicated staff, and we have dedicated employees that really do care about our community and our children and our families. We are mindful that, we had some time to work this out. We had ongoing conversations with the vendor. Storage was always an issue since the beginning of the program, and for lack of really a good reason, we just have not been able to come up with that compromise that would work for everybody.
Compromise with who? Can I just ask? I'm sorry to interrupt. Compromise with who? You're saying compromise. Who are you compromising with?
Compromising with folks that actually took issue with a storage container on that parking lot, or that storage container on what we would come to find out is a historic district commission area of town that comes under a regulatory board that, while we frankly did not see a great regulatory standard for controlling that container, we had recognized that the board does have some jurisdiction for a temporary storage.
No, thank you. I didn't mean to throw you off. I just wanted to
Nope.
understand when you were speaking in the past.
So I do want to mention that, the town is committed to supporting a stand-up paddle boarding program. We have a harbor and waterfront plan that speaks to how important it is to activate the waterfront. And the waterfront is medicine to a lot of people. It's a place where people do find a great deal of recreation, but also wonderful opportunities to just enjoy a sense of place and space. And, we continue to think about ways to support a program. These programs are complicated, though, and they're not something that we can just throw together. They do take teams of really certified and dedicated professionals. It's the water, it's dangerous, it's a big risk. We're mindful of that, but we do have some extraordinary town employees and individuals that are working right now to try to figure out how to put a program on some level in place for this year, and certainly for next year. But we're going to have to come back over the next few weeks and share some additional information, because we don't have all of the pieces in place for that. But some extraordinary work has been done over the last week to reach out and connect with vendors and with service providers that work in stand-up paddleboard programs across the North Shore, and we've had some really productive conversations with some folks. With that said, ultimately, I'll take responsibility for this. I think it's important for folks to know that as the town administrator, these programs are important to me, and it's the contract that I signed that, frankly, I negotiated, and, you know, it was my hope that this would be a contract that would continue to support programs that I know our community needs and our children need, and I'm disappointed and sorry that it just didn't work out.
I open up to board questions, comments.
Yeah, I mean, a few comments. I mean, I just, quite frankly, I'm furious. I'm furious that this program isn't happening. I'm furious that 300 or so children, you know, are not able to, you know, to experience the joys of stand-up paddleboarding in Swampscott. I'm furious that, you know, these children won't have the opportunity to get outside and exercise and gain confidence through this program, through a program that was going to be a huge benefit and a huge revenue driver for the recreation department, but was going to be an integral part of our community and our working waterfront, you know, as we look to activate, you know, those outdoor spaces, especially as we're coming out of a pandemic. I'm furious for the fact that we won't have, you know, increased foot traffic on Humphrey Street to support our local businesses, and the trickle-down effects that will cause. I mean, and I'm sad for all the, you know, for all the kids, and I'm sad for my kids for not having the opportunity to have that experience within our town. So I mean, that's really how I feel. You know, I'm furious. I'm upset. I'm trying to hold that in a little bit, but I am upset, and I think we do need to do better. We must do better. We can't. I mean, this is too important of a program in a very short season to, you know, to try to change, you know, to move the goalposts at the 11th hour. So.
I echo the sentiments of David, but also I am additionally furious that every recipient hasn't received their refund yet. That is a real problem for me, because in my household, I can't afford to send the town X amount of hundreds of dollars for a program that isn't happening and then fill those vacancies. Where am I getting that money? I've already shelled it out. And I know it can't be a snap of a finger and happen, but if we know it's not happening, it should be communicated. How fast is it going to happen? This is how we're issuing refunds. We should be transparent about it. We should not be making people call us for refunds. I think that is unconscionable. That should not happen. And this is not the first time that has been I have brought up that issue, and if you have an update on refunds, I would love to know what that is.
I do think Danielle has an update. I certainly, you know, we, you know, understood that refunds needed to be returned ASAP, and we've looked to do that. Yeah. Joe's got a mic.
Thank you, Joe. As of yesterday, every person has been refunded to their credit card. They were mostly credit cards. But we started working on it immediately. I had to get someone extra into my office to start doing those refunds because there were 312 of them. But they have all been done.
Thank you. Do you want me to keep
Good.
going, or does somebody?
It's up to you.
Oh, okay, sorry.
You can.
So also, outside of the issues that occurred that we can't change, what are we doing to mitigate these issues in the future? Because it seems to me like we signed a contract with a vendor. We knew what we were getting because we used this vendor last year. We knew that the container was going to be an it was in the paper last year.
It's literally the definition of insanity to expect a different outcome, to do the exact same thing and expect a different outcome. So why are we saying that we are shocked or blindsided or surprised? And what are we doing to fix that so that perception doesn't happen in the future for other programs?
So I think, we were working with the vendor, and we did have several meetings with the vendor over the last few weeks to discuss options for addressing some of the concerns that had been presented about the storage container. We had a meeting after the end of last season, and we discussed the storage container, and we have some limited space down in that area for storage, and so there is a real need. There have been a number of ideas that have been presented, but this is a new activity that we're bringing to that area, and I think the thought of a longer-term storage location that may be embedded into other structures, whether it's a gazebo or figuring out how to deal with the storage problem that we have with kayaks and other small boats that are left in that area. It seems to be a pressing issue, and so there's a number of opportunities for us to think more strategically about storage and work with our capital planning to try to address that. When we talked about working with a partner, we also talked about a multi-year contract that would help us think about how to invest in a storage container that would be aesthetically, I think, a little bit more fitting for that area. And the thought, it may take us a few years to come up with the funding to address that.
But Sean, just to that effect, something that's more aesthetically pleasing is still a container. Personally, I don't have a problem with the container. I think the container, the joy that this program brings is it overweighs any aesthetic, that's there. I mean, I go to Fisherman's Beach all year round. I'm a member of the yacht club, and I will tell you, the parking lot holds a number of things that are not aesthetically pleasing a lot of the year. The floats are not aesthetically pleasing. They take up 4 or 5 parking spaces for extended periods of time. The residents that I've talked to, and they've probably dozens over the course of the last week. The message that they've conveyed to me, and they wanted me to share, is we're all for history and preservation of history, but they don't want to live in a museum. We want a working waterfront. We want a waterfront that can be invested in and can be enjoyed by all, not for 2 people to look and say, oh wow, this is beautiful. There's nothing, there's no container, but there's also no kids. There's also no programming. There's also no joy. So we can talk about these long-term plans, and I think that's great, but we also had a year to address these long-term plans last year, and we failed to do so. So, from just as a practical matter, I don't see any reason that a parking lot should be a historical district. The fish house, absolutely. Absolutely, we should preserve the fish house. I don't see how a parking lot should restrict use at Fisherman's Beach, of Fisherman's Beach, for all. Arguably, this is the oldest public beach in the country, as I believe Ann Driscoll has, who's on Zoom, has indicated at a number of town meetings. So this should be used by as many as possible. We can simply not let the minority, the loud minority cannot rule here.
David, I share some of those concerns, and I appreciate them. I do think, it was more important that container stay than the program not move forward. And I wish, we could have, kept that program. That said, I think we made some mistakes, and I think going forward, we have to prioritize some of these programs and figure out how to make sure that, we continue to engage citizens and use these resource areas, in ways that would help.
But we can't prioritize the program if we don't fix the problem, and the problem is that where we want to have the programs is restricted. Correct? So
I think there was a way for us to do it.
ability to have programming because of the restrictions on Fisherman's Beach, or because of the parking lot restrictions. If you don't have the ability now for storage, or, I mean, where are you going to store, if we want to run our own program, where are we
do
going
have
to
the
store
ability.
our?
You have the
We
ability.
have the ability. There's no restriction. There is no restriction to put a container in the parking lot. I mean, the Historic District Commission has an ability for whatever it is, the appearance of a temporary structure, but they can't remove it. They don't approve it being in the parking lot,
So can we talk about why it was removed then, or why we're removing it?
Please.
I'm actually really curious about it, because I don't think any of the conversations, any of the public disclosures, any of the discussion explains why all of a sudden the town, after going through its own RFP process, after dealing with the headache of people complaining about the container last year, didn't come up with a different solution, or just come back and say, we're here, get used to it. Instead, at the 11th hour for a small business owner, the rug was pulled out from them. And all of a sudden, we're putting them in fish lockers, which, again, respectfully, there's not very many uses in our town that are appropriate for the fish lockers, right? And so let's just be clear about that. But at the last minute, all of a sudden that's changed. So I'm curious, why did it get changed? I want to understand why all of a sudden is the decision that was the basis of a year-long process coming out of summer last year, that is 100% your decision under our charter. I want to understand what changed. I want to understand why all of a sudden, after that whole process, that whole year, after collecting 311 families worth of money, 312, that we decided to change our decision. Not we, you. You're the town administrator.
Right.
And so I guess I want to understand, because I don't think I've heard the facts yet to explain it. Because the Historic District Commission chair, decided to explain it on Facebook and said the Historic District, had an application been filed, the Historic District did not have the ability to remove the container. So literally, the chair says it right here. So what normal people would do was just file the application. Oh, you're right, you didn't. I'm beyond the fact that you guys didn't even pick up on the fact that you needed to file the application. That's a non-forced error. You guys should totally be able to pick up on that. But whatever, that happened, right? So the remedy of someone that replaces a window in their house in the historic district without getting permission is they don't all of a sudden take out the window and board up their house. They say, oh, sorry, let me file the application. And they file the application, and they go and they do a mea culpa before the Historic District Commission. And the Historic District Commission either says, nope, those windows are perfectly fine, or sorry, they're not fine, you have to remove them. And then they remedy the situation, but they file the application. But here, we didn't even file the application. Here, we just said uncle. But that's why I'm curious before, who were we compromising with? Because I think what we were compromising with, I guess to be honest with you, I think you were compromising 312 families. Honestly, that's the compromise that was made. Unless I'm missing something, unless there's other facts out there that tells me who we were compromising with, because it doesn't make sense how we could have last summer and you could go through this whole process for a year, Sean. And all of a sudden, right? Something that's completely your decision, we decide to do something totally different at the 11th hour. And then abort altogether the container.
But it's my understanding that Sean said to the vendor, here, you can use the container, everything is yours. And the vendor decided to pull the program and never, hold on,
I'm not saying it.
Going after the emails that I read, that the vendor chose to withdraw the program on a Saturday, and it's my understanding the vendor never even notified the town until the following Tuesday, that the people at Town Hall found out that the vendor had canceled the program over Facebook.
So Sean, let me ask you about that. After you told her, or after the fish house compromise was in place, and she said she didn't want to do there. So when did you tell her that container was going to be there the entire summer? I mean, I saw it the next week, after all that. I saw you saying something of that, but tell us that's after this problem already happened, you saying she could use the container. That's after she said, I'm leaving, you said she could use the container,
When
correct?
did you I would like to know when you told her she could not use the container indefinitely, it was going to be removed. When did the vendor find that information out?
The vendor met with, I did not meet with the vendor, and I did not speak with the vendor. She met with town staff on, I believe, Thursday.
Wednesday.
Week before last, and they had a discussion. They actually went down to the fish house. They looked at the lockers. They,
Was she told at that
it
meeting
was
she
reported
could
back to
not
me
use
that they
the
had
container,
a
though?
consensus that they were gonna try to work something out. And I mistakenly thought, perhaps there is a compromise here. Perhaps there's something here that really will work for both the vendor and the community. If at any point I knew that this was beyond the pale, I would have said, look, we'll use the container because the program was paramount.
But no, but then who were you compromising with? You keep using the word compromise,
Peter,
Sean.
it's,
If the program was
certainly I
paramount,
wasn't-
just listen to me for a second. The program was paramount. You said there was nothing more important than the program happening. I just want to know what interest was so important to compromise that 3 days before the start of a program or a week before the start of a program, after a full year of you working through an RFP process, you would even just say to the business owners, hey, you're probably not going to be able to keep this container here, but let us go show you alternatives. Ignore the sup. Any small business. I mean,
Right.
Mary Ellen's a small business owner. Other people here do small business. Days before your opening for a 3-month short season, you went in and said, hey, by the way, one of the fundamental underlying things of your whole program, we're gonna switch that up.
Peter,
I just don't know who we're I'm just still trying to figure out who we're compromising
I had that
with.
conversation with the vendor back in September. I met the vendor down at the fish house and said, hey, wonderful program. The container is a point of concern.
Then why did you put the
contract?
container out there, and why did you sign a contract that said the container was coming?
Because we were not able to come up with an alternative that really made sense.
Fair enough. So why 3 days before the start of a
Yes.
season did you think you were going to come up with an alternative that you in the year before couldn't come up with? And why assume that would be okay to the business owner?
Because I had staff working with the vendor that indicated to me that there were possible opportunities to use that locker. And the vendor indicated to staff that the lockers may work. Ultimately, they decided they wouldn't, but there was an indication that after they looked at it, that it might work.
So, okay, so
So if he's being led to believe, staff is being led to believe it's gonna work, then there's no indication to staff that this vendor could just pull the plug.
It was
That's
against
not-
the terms of the contract. The contract provided for an 8 by 20 foot container.
Yes,
The fish lockers are not 8 by 20.
Here, let me just ask, if contract or not, if you're working with somebody, if you're in a business agreement, and you're presented, hey, I wanna remove this, and I wanna give you this, and if it doesn't work for you, then wouldn't you say, that does not work for me, I just don't wanna do
no, and this is why not. For the same reason that when we sit in the room sometimes when we have conversations with someone, when we say to a committee or we say something, when we talk to committee members and we say, what do you think? I like the container. What do you think? Do I really think, after 7 years of sitting here, that everybody's so open-minded that they're really going to tell me everything, especially when they disagree with me? Or, no, what happens is they know the unspoken pressure here. When she, 3 days before, 5 days before, 7 days before, I think it's very reasonable for a business owner to be said, look at this container thing continues to be a headache, and, well, we're now looking at July 5th being an outside date, but we're going to put you somewhere else. As a small business owner, I'm sorry, who's been pushed around previously, I kind of get the idea that she's gonna go along and say, oh, I guess if this is what we have to do. And then if she had second thoughts later, I'm okay with her having second thoughts, but it doesn't surprise me. And I don't even like this idea that we're even remotely putting it on the small business owner's shoulders here, because the truth is, the conversation should have never happened.
Agreed.
That conversation should have never happened, so we had a container. You made the decision to put a container there. You signed a contract after doing an RFP that put a container there.
Yep.
Now, do I think you should have made it prettier? Do I think so you should have filed for permit? Yeah, sure, absolutely. But that's not what happened. And it was your decision to make.
And if the,
Right.
if the vendor felt as though this program was not going to happen, if she did not look at alternatives to the container, then it is not her fault for entertaining alternatives. If her care was to provide the service to the community, to, yes, also to make money, but to provide the service to the community, and one way to go about doing that was to look at alternatives, then I don't think we should be holding her feet to the fire because she decided she didn't want that alternative.
So I'm just going to, I agree with you completely. So let me kind of say, I'm still wanting to know who we were compromising with, right? So were we compromising with faceless, nameless people who just thought the container was ugly? Are we compromising with the business owner? Are we compromising with the Historic District Commission? The Historic District Commission said they couldn't have removed it anyways. People didn't like it, but you previously said, oh, that's okay. It's paramount. The program's paramount. You said that a year ago. Like, you have been so consistent on that, and I really appreciate that. I don't know. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to suggest it's not any one of these things. I think it's all these things, right? I think you're trying to compromise and make everybody happy, and sometimes when you try and split a baby, you just end up with two halves, right? And getting to compromise isn't the way to get to. Sometimes you just got to say, we made this decision, we're at a point of no return, we're doing this. We have 312 families. So our charter, finally, after years, gives, you know, going back a couple of years now, gives the town administrator complete authority, right? You had complete authority to do it, right? Now, I will openly acknowledge, I'm aware of the fact that one board member talked to you multiple times. That board member, Mary Ellen, came to us a year before she was ever elected and opposed the container and asked for it. She's been very open and honest about it.
Very honest.
Very open and honest about it. And while I think her communication to the Historic District Commission on town email claiming to be a resident isn't the way we're supposed to be communicating to committees, and I think is actually just not correct, I do want to acknowledge the fact that I also get when one board member shows up at your office or calls you multiple times and says something, it can cause you to all of a sudden question and try and compromise. And for that reason, I think that, frankly, the board, this is, select board members, we have incredible power, we have incredible ability to do some great things, and this form here is where we use it. So we have less autonomy. We give up autonomy because we don't get to do it. Majority rules here, right? And so, again, respectfully, while I disagree with you on the substance, Mary Ellen, about the container, I also respectfully disagree about what I believe to be interfering with the town administrator's decision to do that. And I'm going to, so I think that matters, because last year you didn't have anybody saying they didn't want it here, and it stayed. This year, now I'm not saying it's the only thing. I think there's other things that messed it up and just caused, you were busy, you weren't focusing, you didn't get the answers when you needed them, whatever, plenty of reasons. This is not just one thing. But I do believe this board takes some responsibility as well. And that's because it is a board here, and I believe as though when it's your authority under the charter, you should do it. That didn't require any board action. So I want to differ a situation where the board comes and talks to you independently, but something that requires board action. So when a board member says, hey, I think it would be a really great idea if we did something in the budget, or I think it would be a really great idea if we put something in the warrant, or I think we should do a capital need, and says, I think that would be great. That's sharing their thoughts for something that has to come back to the board for the board to bless. The board, a majority of the board ultimately is making the decision on that, not you. You put a recommendation out there. The board can share their thoughts and feelings about this. I just ask this board to think twice before we decide to insert ourselves into things that are independently 100% the town administrator's decision here, because while it is only one person's opinion, and sometimes two persons' opinion, that matters. Every conversation we have with the town administrator is a political conversation. We are the town administrator's bosses, and the town administrator is going to bend over backwards for any one of us at any time to do what he can do. And so while he won't say that's why he made the decision, I know because I've seen it in other jurisdictions. He's talked for years about his experience in Plastow with one or two board members that would regularly call him up, and, you know, Sean's really good, and he will bend over backwards. He doesn't even need to agree with you. He bends over backwards for this. So I just ask us to recognize our inadvertent or advertent influence in places that at times we shouldn't be seeking to influence it, because it really does matter. And I think it's really unfortunate here, because I think, frankly, a lot of bad judgment calls were made to do this. And the worst thing is, it undermines so much, is why I care about it. It's not no disrespect to the 312 families, I care about that. I can't sit on a paddleboard for the life of me, I have no balance whatsoever. So it's not about paddleboarding for me, it's about every other initiative that we try and do, right? That it's an unforced error, right? We stepped on our own toes here. And it makes me mad because we've been working so hard to do these types of things and do more of these types of things and then get it so that when people do have complaints about an ugly container for 12 weeks, we say, God, do you remember when we used to laugh about the ugly container for 12 weeks? But think about how active our waterfront is. Finally, we have an active waterfront, right? We're not that far to the point where we take that for granted. It only takes a couple of people still complaining to then all of a sudden have judgment calls go the wrong way, or people try and compromise and split babies. And so we're responsible for this ultimately, Sean, not just you. We are as well. But we just got to not make these unforced errors.
So I want to be respectful here. It's just, I also want to get home at some point tonight. I honestly feel that to minimize the fact that people did not like, even people who do like the program, did not like the container sitting there, that they shouldn't have a say or they shouldn't have opinion or things can't be worked out. I just think that that's unacceptable, because we do have ways to put programs together. We do have ways to think this through, and we do have ways to make things work and make everybody, comfortable with what's going on. I don't think there's one person in this town that doesn't want to see a program or kids having joy. I mean, that's I'm sure that's not on anyone's thought. However, it was clear last year that many people from the yacht club, people from the boating community, people that had issues with seniors, many people came and voiced that. I know Sean received those calls. So to think that because I voiced my opinion to Sean, the same as every member on this board does over and over, I think that's unacceptable. I don't even know what you're thinking, to be honest with you. But we're spending so much time talking about not having a program, and I respectfully disagree. I do think a good part of this is on the vendor. I don't think that vendor was shy in any way. I think, from what I have heard of this vendor, she's a very strong woman. I think she can hold her own. I think she could voice, no way am I going to put my boards over into that locker. I give her a whole lot more credit at being able to express herself. I'm disappointed in the way that she chose to cancel this program. I think that, so this is my opinion, I am very disappointed in how she chose to cancel this program, in the manner in which she canceled the program. I don't think there was a phone call to the recreation director during office hours. That's my opinion. I'm disappointed in it. And I think right now what I'd like to see is, I would like to immediately see us put together a program. And I believe that we could put together a program at a much discounted price, and I think we could do it within a matter of days, in less than a week. And I actually did have a conversation, here's a conversation I did have with Sean, saying, can we put something together now? Can we reach out to people who have worked for the schools, people who have athletic backgrounds, people who have coaching backgrounds, teaching backgrounds, and can we assist and put together a program? Can we help? So I think we could put some effort together and have this thing up and going.
But we also had a program that was then.
We don't have a
that
program.
Was that we did. We had a sub program. We had a contract, and that was then discarded. The back to the point about Sup East Coast, when the article came in the paper last year, I believe from my conversations with Leah that gave cover to, quite frankly, a bunch of old white men from the yacht club and from the boating community to simply harass this small business owner. It gave cover. It was certainly not welcome. I had to intervene on a number of occasions, namely the Bentwater Day at the beach last year, because there was an issue with someone from the yacht club and Leah in a verbal altercation. I believe that article did incredible damage to Leah and her business and her psyche, and she went to work every day extremely stressed and strained from the fact that she didn't know which direction she was going to be attacked. And that's what that did to her. That's what that did to that woman-owned small business. It did. And I've had conversations with her about it, and that was completely and utterly unacceptable.
So, Mary Ellen, I'm sorry if you thought I was going on too long, but I'm now going to finish.
Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but.
That's okay.
You were going on.
Okay. Thanks for that observation. I'm just going to finish by saying I actually think the rights of everyone to complain, I'm not minimizing, I'm actually minimizing the rights of one, if we want to be honest about it. Everybody in this town should call the town administrator, should write a letter, do what they want, and express themselves to us and otherwise. All I'm saying tonight is, as board members, we give up some autonomy to get on this board. You actually have less autonomy as a select board member now, because you are actually, we act as a board. And I just ask you to bring, and my board members, all of us, bring your opposition to things to the table. Don't vote yes in recommendation of a capital article, then call chairs of committees and voice your independent opposition. The board has voted. And so I'm just asking us to, any of us, all of us, bring it here, bring it public. You have a voice. The town administrator will still hear that, but it's also being done at a point in time where the town administrator then can hear from others that may not agree, or that agree on the board here, so the town administrator understands where the direction of the board is to the extent he or she cares where the direction of the board is. But when there's decisions for the town administrator to make, that clearly 100% his authority to make, I just ask that we as a board, consistent with what the select board handbook says, let the town administrator do their job. Similarly, the handbook says, let the committees do their job without undue influence. I believe an email from a select board member about something is potentially undue influence. You can't just be a resident anymore. We gave that up. We all gave that up. We're no longer residents. We're a select board member that may not be speaking on behalf of the board, but we are still a select board member. There is no resident Peter Spelios and resident Mary Ellen Fletcher. We are members of the select board. We just don't speak for the select board, and I just ask us to be conscientious about that. And because I think it truly does matter, because there's going to be no end to these things where we're changing things, we're doing things. If they were easy, they would have happened a long time ago. If there were people complaining, there's always going to be people complaining about things. We can try and compromise, but sometimes compromise just ends up with two bad halves. And so I just ask us to all be cognizant about that, because I think that is critically important. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I want to also say this in regards to what Mary Ellen just said about the vendor and Mary Ellen's feelings of her unprofessionalism. I know in this vendor's heart, she was not trying to have this be the outcome. I 100% believe that to be true, and I know that she was in turmoil over having to make this decision. I know that you feel like it was a whiplash decision, but perhaps if we had the traffic of the emails and conversations that have been going on since November about an alternative for the container or some other information that was out there, then perhaps you would not feel so whiplashed by the decision. She has a certain number of days for which to professionally put forth her business, the summer months. And as we've already stated, to pull the carpet out from under her in her last days before she's supposed to start, as she's starting a program in other municipalities, as she's getting things off the ground elsewhere. We're not her only client. I just think it's ridiculous to put it on the vendor to say that everybody could have been more professional in the situation, but this is not her fault. And I just want to make it very clear that I feel like she must have been backed into such a corner to make that decision, whether or not you feel it was professional or not. She did not make it lightly, in my opinion, and I disagree with the idea that was an unprofessional action in her, considering the events that occurred as I understand them.
So I think I'd like to thanks Katie and everyone for your comments, and you know, my only comment is on Peter's observations on the role of the board and how there's a separation between board and resident, and that I agree with that completely. I think this whole dialogue tonight illustrates sort of how dysfunctional it becomes when we operate in this way. And just, you know, I think that if 5 individuals are operating that way without doing it as a body, as it pertains to the role of staff or the town administrator, then it will just breed in dysfunction consistently. I mean, that's sort of the outcome that we'll see. I do want to open it up to people.
Wait, before you open up, I just do have a question, because I think most of this conversation, well, the conversation from Peter is being pointed at me because I did appear last year at the select board meeting during resident comment, and I did also reiterate to Sean that my opinion on that container didn't change. I have no intention of not expressing myself to Sean or to any other committee or any other individual in this town. Everyone has a right to their opinion. I am not speaking for the entire board, unless at some point I am speaking for the board, but if you're saying that everyone on the select board is not going to be having a conversation with Sean, then let's just say that.
That's not what I'm saying.
But there's a lot of conversations that go on with Sean. A lot of conversations about different topics. And for anyone to turn around and say, the reason this happened was because Mary Ellen told them that she didn't like the container, that's just off the charts.
And no one has said that. What I said was there are multiple things, Mary Ellen, but I know you love the word transparent, so let's just talk about it. When you show up to this town administrator multiple times and raising the same thing because you didn't like his answer the first time, when you show up a third time saying that the business person, the vendor, is saying something mean about you on social media, it becomes something.
Peter,
that
you're
is,
making comments that are not even true.
But Mary Ellen,
you're not making. Just please be truthful.
It becomes predominant. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have conversations. I think what we're talking about here is there are different types of conversations, right? If the town administrator is making a decision about something, he can seek input and advice from any of us and all of us at any time that he wants to. I'm differentiating things that come back here for action versus things that don't come back here for action, because it does make the town administrator, and at least let the chairman know that you're having those conversations. You should have all the opinions you want, right? But they shouldn't be done as a select board member in just emails sent from personal email addresses or town email addresses just claiming to be a resident without, frankly, bring them here. You can ask for anything to be on the agenda at any time you want. That is actually a power you have as a select board member unilaterally, and the chairman almost always respects it. And so let's have those conversations here. Let's not have them that, a business person, last year had a tough time with the town administrator and feeling, I'm being pushed around. But this year, it's a town administrator and a select board member. So what do you think that business person thinks? That business person thinks, geez, the deck is worse this year than it was last year for me. And that matters. And I think, frankly, for us, for a second to put this on the business person when it's a critical core function. We wanted the service. Mm-hmm. For us, for a second to put this on the business, again, you're a small business owner, so you maybe know what it's like. But the second to put it on the small business owner, when we say this is a paramount function, something important for 312 families in our town, is I can't even believe for a second we're going to put it on her. And I understand that you may not like the way she has talked about you, or you think you've talked about her publicly, mm-hmm. but it doesn't matter, right? It just doesn't matter. And we just got to all recognize our all individual contributions for this type of thing. We have, by virtue of this, sent a message to any possible vendor that we can change the rules because a town administrator can be whimsical about it, or a select board member can be whimsical, and that's actually not how it works.
I just respectfully disagree with multiple comments that you made. They're not even factual, and we could stay here all night.
I think the select board's conduct is very important. That's not why we're here. We're here because we no longer have a program, and there are 312 families who are out.
Right.
The ability to have the benefit of the program, and a lot of those folks are here and they'd like to speak. So I think we could put this aside for the time being and continue this discussion and allow the public to speak if they would like to.
I agree. So let's move on to that. I'm opening up to public comment. If people have a comment who are here, if you can move down to the microphones down here. And just please, your name and address, please.
My name is Jeannie Patz. I live at 29 Nason Road. I am a town meeting member. I'm a volunteer in the community as a PTO co-president of the Stanley School. I have a lot to say, but I just want to say I do not attend these meetings. I do not know what's gone down since Mary Ellen Fletcher was elected, but this feels like an attack. I don't like it at all. I think it's really unfair. I don't care what the topic is. I don't care if it's stand-up paddleboard. I do not care. What just happened is not okay. First of all, she was mansplained, to death. And second of all, I just think talking about something that we don't know is true. I mean, I don't know, do we all have records of what phone calls and emails that Mary Ellen did? I don't know. I don't like it at all. I've said that. I'm done. Now, moving on. I have 2 kids who are registered for stand-up paddleboard. Am I disappointed that it's not happening? Absolutely. I'd like to go back to the fact that there was a meeting on June 15th. Was there not? A Historic District Commission meeting. Yeah. There was a meeting. It was a meeting about a permit that was not submitted. So on paper, in theory, this program is not happening because any one person sitting here tonight complained about it, about a container, or any person in general complained about the container, right? It's because a piece of paper wasn't filed. Am I right?
No.
No.
You're not.
Why?
Because the piece
my
of paper,
husband's not here, so I can
because
be
the
wrong.
piece of paper could have been filed the moment they knew the piece of paper hadn't been filed. That's not the reason. Someone, once they found out the piece of paper needed to be filed, decided not to file the piece of paper, and that's why I keep asking the town administrator, why did we decide just not to file for the permit?
Yep. We could have filed for the permit.
Anytime. Could do it right now.
And the container could still be there.
Could do it right now.
Okay.
But for some reason, it wasn't filed, and
All right.
it feels like that was a compromise to somebody.
But I know that's been the narrative of why it happened.
But it wasn't. The narrative on Peter and David's Facebook pages was that it's because people complained about the container. That's what the narrative was.
It is. And I stand by that, Jeannie, 100%. 100% I stand by that, because if people weren't complaining about it, the town administrator in a second would file that piece of paper. Something kept the town administrator from filing that piece of paper.
Okay.
Not because he had a desire to tell 312 families not to have a program. He did it because he felt like he needed a compromise.
Okay.
And it was a bad decision.
We asked Sean, did he feel pressured to, I mean, I don't understand. I feel like the person who didn't do it didn't say he felt pressured by Mary Ellen Fletcher, did he?
I'm not,
did he?
Again, you can ask him, he can answer however he wants.
Okay,
I don't ask him because I don't ask him to speak out about select board members. He didn't raise it, I'm raising it. It's my feeling about it, but he can certainly answer for himself if he wants to.
Yeah, I don't think, look, it's clear that, one of the select board members was unhappy about the container. And look, my job is to actually support this board. And my job is to try to, at times, find compromise where, frankly, it may not exist. And I think this is an example. Most of the time, we actually work as hard as we possibly can to find compromise. But it didn't work out. And ultimately, as I said at the beginning of this meeting, I'll take responsibility for that. Do I wish I, frankly, knew that I had a vendor that just didn't have the ability to, work with, a different storage option, even though I had over a year worth of conversations with that vendor, and I had staff that had worked incredibly hard with that vendor to try to help that vendor. I mean, we didn't originally have storage in the RFP. We put it in there because we wanted to help a vendor. And for me, at the end of the day, we've learned a few lessons here because, as the board has mentioned, there are 312 families that ultimately are paying the price. And that's not okay. It's not okay with me. That's not okay with anybody else. The disruption that caused is real. And I get that. And I want to acknowledge that, we should be better. Do I feel pressure? There's not a day that goes by that I don't feel pressure. There's not a town administrator, town manager, mayor that somehow doesn't feel the conflict, the vitriol, the absolute nastiness that we have in this world that we live in. I'm up to here with it, frankly. I want people to be better. Frankly, if I could have found a way to namaste something, or found a way to say, hey, work with me, let me help you, let me find a way to make this work, I would have gone to my toolbox of possibilities. Just like this board, it has power, I have power too. I like to think I have power to solve bigger problems than this, but frankly, this eluded me, and I'm frustrated by that. I think there were some things that could have been communicated more effectively, probably on all sides. We have a new board here. We have two newly elected officials. We have some relationships that we have to work out. Government is not easy, but frankly, I do think we have some opportunities to learn from this.
Thank you. I have one last thing to say, and that is, first of all, thank you to all of you for serving our community. And also, I beg you to please work together. Please work together. Demonstrate how you want your constituents to interact and interface with you. Please do that with each other. I beg of you. We all disagree. We all have different opinions, and I think it's good. It's good to have this discourse and this disagreement. I think it's a healthy, good thing, so let's not fight it. Let's work with it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Judah Zoll. I live in Swampscott. I am disappointed that the Swampscott paddleboard program is canceled. Here's why. I have to get in the car earlier. I will not have as much time to play before camp. And I'll have close to no friends there. I won't know most people there. Select board, please bring this program back. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Judith.
Good evening. Most of you know me. I'm Keiko Zoll, a Swampscott Town Meeting member for Precinct 5. I come before you as a neighbor, taxpayer, and town meeting member to express my concerns about the last-minute cancellation of the stand-up paddleboarding program through the Swampscott Rec Department. I am one of those 312 families affected by that cancellation. In April, I registered my son, who you just heard, for a one-week session of the SUP program in July. The town was more than happy to process my $275 registration fee in April, despite the fact that the program's occurrence was allegedly not yet confirmed at that time. I only found out the program was canceled last week from a Facebook post shared by Selectman Spelios on his campaign Facebook page. To date, I have received no official communication from the town that the program has been canceled. In fact, it's here that I heard tonight that refunds are being processed. I don't know if it's a matter of it takes a couple of days, but I just checked all my bank accounts and the Amex card. I don't have that $275 back, and I still don't have any information about when I'm going to see that money because I haven't heard anything from the town. I am aware that an email was sent from the rec department to some families who had registered about cancellation and refunds, but I haven't received that email. It's my understanding that it only went out to families who signed up for this week's session since it was supposed to start this week. So when will the town notify all registrants? Not everybody is on Facebook, and it's entirely possible there are families out there right now who are counting on this program happening that don't watch these hearings, that don't come here, that aren't on Facebook, and have no idea that something they're looking at as a source of childcare for them this summer is no longer happening. Please don't misconstrue the intent of my comments. I don't simply want my money back, but let's be clear and talk about numbers here. If we had 312 participants at $275 a pop, this program would have generated $85,800 for the town. That is not chump change. As a taxpayer and town meeting member, I want answers about the operational failures that occurred within Town Hall and the Rec Department as they failed to ensure that this program could be delivered safely and with high quality, as it has been for the past 3 summers and per the town's own RFP. As a mother, I come here before you to share that I am so tired of having to tell my son, sorry, honey, yet another thing you've been looking forward to has been canceled, because he's been hearing that for the last 2 years. For him, it doesn't matter why it was canceled or all the adult issues that prevented it from happening. It's just another disappointment in his childhood so irreparably impacted by COVID. I am deeply concerned about administrative mismanagement happening at Town Hall. The sudden cancellation of the stand-up paddleboard program is yet another example in a long line of problematic instances that indicate systemic failures within town administration, from the turnover of our town HR director, the departure of our town clerk, who was a freaking treasure in my eyes, and the failure to hire a town DEI director. And I urge each of you, as our select board, to hold our town administrator accountable in the means and ways that you have to do that. Thank you for allowing me to offer my comments before you this evening.
Thank you, Keiko. I just want to mention, I think the email notification went out. My understanding is it went out to all the email addresses that the rec has, whether they register. I don't know why you didn't get it, but my understanding, Danielle, if you can confirm that it went to the full email list.
The first email that went out went to people that were in the program, saying that I was trying to do something to get them back.
Right.
And then the second one, because we had already started doing the refunds, because we started that process right away as soon as we knew. By the time I went to go send the second email out, the people who had been refunded weren't in the system anymore as being in that program. So I ended up sending the email to everybody who had an account with us from pre-K to 9th grade. So that one went out to a larger group of people.
Okay.
The last email I have is the copy of my receipt, and that was in April.
So I'm wondering if I look in your account, if you're not set up for cancellation emails or something like that. Do you get other emails from me?
All the other emails.
Yeah, so I'll look at that, but I did send those out.
Okay, awesome.
Okay?
Okay.
And I want to tell you that I am also very disappointed that this isn't running. I mean, I really tried to make it work. So I apologize for that.
Thanks, Danielle.
Oh, and our town accountant is telling me that it takes 72 hours for something to, and we were doing them from last week up until yesterday. It took that long.
Yeah, once the refund hits your credit card, sometimes it takes 72 hours for them to give it back to you.
Awesome, thank you.
If you don't see it within 72 hours, definitely.
Okay. Thanks, Danielle.
Good evening. I'm Andrew Steingeiser, a member of the Historic District Commission. I personally support our wonderful recreation programs and thank Danielle for her ongoing efforts. We really appreciate that. We have 2 young children, and I look forward to them participating as soon as they're able to stand up on a board or do other things. I find the recent events surrounding this issue quite disturbing. I'd like to share a few thoughts and attempt to clarify a few things. What we're seeing here is, around this issue, is a dissolve of productive political discourse. It's necessary to maintain a level of decorum and respect for other people. Some people seem to be falling in line with the national temperature of politics at the local level. In order to collaborate, agreeing to abide by the basic rules set forth in the town's bylaws is necessary to advance our commitment to the town and accomplish our common goals. The HDC, the Historic District Commission, had only asked for process to be followed by the town, the same process we hold private citizens to. If you go back and watch the riveting second meeting in June, there's quite a lot of uninformed commentary on this topic. The HDC has not approved or disapproved anything related to this. The HDC fully supports the recreation programs. The HDC is charged with following and enforcing the bylaws put in place by the town, approved by town meeting. The HDC has no jurisdiction over the container being there, only the exact placement and how long it will be there. The HDC had received nothing to review except a letter saying the town had already decided to locate the storage for the paddleboard program to a different unspecified location. Undermining boards and committees through public comment, social media, or innuendo directly impacts their ability to perform their duties. We are a committee of volunteers, volunteer citizens, trying to provide a professional skill set to the benefit of our community. Damage done to committees is damage done to the town. The various entities of the town government need to be informed of and supportive of what each other are doing. I implore you to be kind to your neighbors in an attempt to restore a level of decorum and respect for one another. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew.
Can I say something, Neil? Andrew, just, I want you to, I don't think you heard, and I want to make sure you didn't hear it. I think one select board member made an opinion about what the jurisdiction should be as a macro conversation, but I don't think anybody here blames the Historic District Commission at all. You guys, I think that's why I specifically made sure to read the chairman's comment when he said you guys did nothing. You guys, no one filed a piece of paper. What I think you're hearing is why wasn't the piece of paper filed, and why was the decision made to not file the piece of paper? So I think you guys, in fairness, and I think the chairman was right by saying you guys, he properly said the jurisdiction for it. So I want you to hear that from me specifically, but admittedly, there may be a bigger conversation about jurisdictional issues and whether or not the parking lot is an appropriate historic district or not, but that's not criticism of HDC. No. That is more of a macro policy commentary.
Right.
But I personally, and I think the others can say as well, you guys asked us to do exactly what we ask every resident to do. And,
right.
I don't think anybody has a problem with that.
And this is not the first time HDC has come out in support of the vendor. On their meeting, if anybody else attended, you guys were very explicit to say this has nothing to do with us against rec programs, us against a specific vendor. You were very clear about that. So I know I am not under this interpretation of what was said at that meeting, that you guys were against this program whatsoever, that this is in any way your fault.
We appreciate these comments. I think there remains a lot of confusion around the issue whether that historic site is the cause of the movement or not moving this container. So I think there remains some confusion. I appreciate the clarification on the issue, and I hope we can continue having conversations together about public property applications following the same protocols that private citizens are also following. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. We've got some folks on Zoom. I'm going to, Ann Driscoll is raising her hand. Hi, Ann.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am Ann Driscoll. I live at 2 Upland Road. I'm a town meeting member in Precinct 1. And I want to say, first of all, that I very much support a stand-up paddleboard program. I think it's a great idea. It's very clear that there are 312 families who are very much disappointed by the fact that this vendor has withdrawn the programming. There are other people also in town who were very much disappointed to see that container return. But I guess I really want to focus on the fact that what we have now is an opportunity to rethink this program and the best ways of delivering this program. This isn't an either-or situation. It isn't that there's either a container going to be there or not. I think we have to think more broadly about our water resources, our waterfront resources. and how we might use them. And arguably, some people might say that maybe it isn't the best idea to have that program at Fisherman's Beach where, according to Maddie, who handles all the moorings, there's like 200 boats. There are another over 100 boats that are stored on Fisherman's, as well as a novice sailing program that's operating out of there. So maybe this is an opportunity to think about other alternatives, like having a program at Eisman's Beach and having the storage be at Phillips Park. I know that somebody mentioned that this was a $75,000, $80,000 program for the town, but in fact, 75% of that intake, the revenue intake, was going to the vendor. So maybe this is an opportunity for us to think about, much like we offer a sailing program, we have our own boats, we can buy our own boards and, you know, hire staff to teach the kids in the program and offer adult programs as well. I also think this is an opportunity that we widen the RFP process. I know of a couple of people who do this kind of programming in other communities who would very much be interested in offering a program if we decide not to do our own program, that they would be interested in offering a program probably next year. It probably isn't possible for this year. But hopefully we can figure out some solution for the immediate future and definitely rethink what we do in the long term. Because I think that, you know, I can empathize with Sean that he was trying to respond to everybody's concerns. And the people who want this program, by all means, should be heard. But the people who don't think that a container belongs on a historic district in a nationally registered historic site, they should be heard. The businesses that had to see that container and have it mar very expensive oceanfront property that they've paid for, I can understand that. So I think that we are creative enough, we are you know, resourceful enough that we can find a solution that addresses everyone's concerns. And that's all I have to say. And I do have one other thing to say about the article that appeared. I can understand if Leah was upset because I'm sure it didn't set well to hear that people were upset about that container for her. But I disagree because basically that article was factually accurate. So I'm sorry that that upset her. But anyways, that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Could I just ask if
Sure.
Danielle might be able to speak to the RFP process? Because I think Anne brought up a good point about she maybe knows some other folks who would like to participate in the RFP process, but if maybe you could just explain how it happened, that way we can sort of dispel some, or maybe Sean can, somebody?
Yeah, I mean, we, if Danielle wants to provide some updates, she did help coordinate that, but we generally, we issue RFPs and we send them out to, websites for procurement, state websites, so they're, we also this past year reached out to different vendors. I've been in touch with the, different providers as well. I think our first year we had 3 responders, or we got 3 quotes. Our second year, once we hired a vendor, we just had 1 proposal, and our third year we just had 1 proposal. So it's a small industry. We don't have a lot of stand-up paddleboard businesses, and once a firm, gets a contract, generally, it's hard to kind of get other vendors involved, but there are ways to do that. So.
Thank you.
Thanks. Deb Newman has her hand raised, and I think we're going to do, there are 2 more after Deb, and then I think we're probably going to move on from this.
Hi, good evening.
Hi,
I
Deb.
agree with I agree with everything Ms. Driscoll has said. She said it eloquently and honestly and intelligently. And I don't want to re-inflame the situation, but other people already covered some of the comments I had. I would like to say that I doubt that in his 7 years, Mr. Spelios has never spoken independently to the town administrator or outside of a public meeting. And it's disingenuous of him to call Ms. Fletcher's integrity into question. She's the only board member, it appears, who offered a way to help get a town SUP program up and running. I don't think she has that much influence on Mr. Fitzgerald. Tonight, the town administrator and Ms. Fletcher are being attacked by Mr. Spelios in public. Last week, he was busy on Facebook denigrating a so-called vocal minority who he claimed were against the program, when all they were against was the container, which could have been housed elsewhere, as we've heard. Also, I understand and sympathize with the families who are disappointed and frustrated at having to rearrange their schedules. But also, it's not the end of the world that the kids can't paddle for an hour or so. I certainly don't think that Mr. Grishman's exponential fury is the correct response, and it certainly isn't constructive. Thank you.
I'm sorry, can I make a comment?
Yes. As long as you don't use exponential fury.
Go ahead.
I don't think that we're fully appreciating a parent's issue with trying to schedule summers for their children. I know I am a working parent. I am very blessed to have a husband who's a teacher. So this was a want for me, not a need. But I know a lot of folks who have two parents who work the entire summer, and although this is called a program, they were using this as childcare or camp for their child.
Yep.
So to downplay that issue does make me furious, as you can tell. And I disagree with the characterization that it is not a big deal. It is a big deal. It may not be a big deal for every single one of those 312 families, but it is a big deal. And if it's a big deal to one of those 312 families, then it's a big deal to me.
Yep.
I think that in the grand scheme of the world and what is going on, it's not a big deal, and I don't mean to minimize your personal situation. I was a single parent who worked 80 hours a week, so I understand all about childcare. I don't think bringing up the childcare card is the right way to address this. This is the summer. This is kids being able to go to a certain kind of camp. There are plenty of other camps.
There are not plenty of other camps at the, I just want to say there are not plenty of other camps available at the last minute, moments before. When you find out the week before the camp is supposed to start, there are not plenty of other camps for which you have the opportunity to become part of, and also which are not financially in the same category as this camp was. So I just want to make that distinction because it's really important.
All right.
I think the phrase "don't play the child care card" says everything that needs to be said there. I can't believe that was just said. The child care card.
Okay, so I think I want to give the last people opportunity to speak, and then we're going to move on. It's important to let people comment. I think people have been sitting on this for a while. We've all shared our thoughts. Board members can certainly respond, but I think allowing residents to say their piece, I think all opinions have essentially been expressed at this point. I also would appreciate people, if your comment is similar to someone else's, if you can just say you agree with so-and-so and leave it at that, that would be helpful for us in our meeting, but you can say what you need to say. So Tasia, I think, is next.
Hi, Tasia Facilio on Lewis Road, again, speaking. I am also a member of the Board of Assessors and a town meeting member. I am going to echo a lot of what others have said. My two daughters were enrolled in 4 sessions each for paddleboard, so that's 8 sessions. That was about $2,000. I've gotten half of that back in credit, and I'm hoping the other half is just still being processed, but it's not showing up on any of my statements. So the thing I really want to drill home here is, you know, we're a town. We're made up of many people with many opinions, and we are almost never going to all agree. The situation with the Hawthorne Hotel, you know it, that was like the best thing that could happen to this town, and we still had two dissenting votes at town meeting, or 3, who didn't want to purchase that. So, you know, everyone has the right to be heard. Somebody said that the container isn't ugly earlier. The container is absolutely hideous. There is no doubt about that. It may not bother some people, but I can't imagine anyone standing there looking at it and telling me that it's not ugly. It's just ugly. I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? But a couple of things that were said in the meeting tonight. You know, Katie, you had said that the select board conduct is really important, and you're the top leaders in this town. You're the top elected officials. It is the tone of these meetings, like Jeannie said earlier, they're just awful. The tone at town meeting isn't good. I can't tell you how many people have come up to me after town meetings because I've been advocating for the middle school and apologizing to me for being treated disrespectfully. People I don't know. Because I wanted the roof to be fixed and the windows to be fixed, and I respectfully talked about that during town meeting. It's out of control. The culture, the tone of our town is out of control. So there was a time when I first got elected to the Board of Assessors, that's why I wanted you all to know that I'm on the board, where Peter contacted me to meet. And Peter, I remember very clearly one of the things I said to you at that meeting was that I was very concerned that almost every vote I saw on the select board was a unanimous vote. There were no dissenting votes, ever. And I can't tell you how bad that is. What that tells me is there are 5 members. You guys are supposed to represent everyone on the town, not just one perspective. So the idea is that conflict is natural, and it should come, and you should be able to respectfully work through it to find a solution that works for everybody. Now, it may not work perfectly for everybody, but you should be able to make situations better by working together instead of against each other. And when you see select board members' emails being plastered on Facebook and select board members going on Facebook and commenting, you know, these vague references, we all know what you're trying to say. We get the energy. It's not good. You're the ones who are creating the divide in our town. And I really, really, really hope that you will take my words to heart, because Swampscott's a great place to live. And it's a wonderful community, but it is so divided now over so many topics. And to put this blame on Mary Ellen is totally wrong. Mary Ellen wanted the program, and she also wanted a solution to provide for the business of the SUP board, and also to provide for the other businesses in the area, and to respect the historic district. So she was trying to serve everyone there. Sean, I have a question for you, if you don't mind. You had mentioned that you had spoken to some other vendors, and what would their storage contain? What would their storage solutions be? Are they requiring a container?
You know, some of the vendors actually had a box truck. Some did need on-site storage. So we have a number of stand-up paddleboard programs across the North Shore with a number of different storage options. I think, you know, the programs that continue to grow, like ours, quickly outgrew the box trucks, and, you know, these boards are heavy. The boards that are used by programs typically are heavier construction, and they're not they're more durable and they get banged and you know, they just need to be constructed out of more durable and heavier materials. So it's very difficult for staff to lug these things around. So the proximity of storage was always a big concern. And those are the same concerns that were presented to me about our program. And that's why I think the proximity of where we offer sub-programs and how we provide storage is going to continue to be an issue, because it will impact staff, and we've got to make sure that, people aren't getting injured just trying to get onto the water.
Okay, but there were other solutions that could have been, there were other solutions that could have been put into play. I think that was what I'm walking away with. So, I'm begging you all to really try to work together and try to change the tone of our government here in town, because it's really just, it's unacceptable the way it is. And we're all working towards a common goal, and our government should be here to serve the people. Thank you.
Thank you, Tasia. All right, Liz Papalardo, and then I think that's it.
Good evening, Elizabeth Papalardo. So I echo a lot of what the speakers have already said tonight, and I just want a point of order. I feel like we're all putting this on Mary Ellen, but Sean had said earlier that the issue was he was told by staff that the vendor was comfortable with the arrangement, and that was what he was going off. That was the information that he was going off of when, the vendor pulled out. So understandably, there were some mistakes made, and, we all make mistakes. And I noticed when, they showed a shot of the audience, you have a lot of great staff members sitting in that audience who do so many good things for the town, and then we hear select board members saying they're furious and they trying to contain themselves. Well, let's give a little grace here too, and also maybe direct our attentions to where it went wrong, where to fix it, and instead of just directing it on Mary Ellen. And then just a broader comment, I'm just curious, I've heard a couple people mention activating the waterfront, and it seems to be a message that's coming up over and over again. So I'm curious how that relates to this and what exactly you guys are trying to get at with that. Thanks.
Do you want me to respond to that? Yeah, activating the waterfront means that more people get to use it than just the folks that live on the water. You've got a town of 15,000 people, and you have incredible environmental resource areas on your waterfront, and it's important that we bring programs and events to the waterfront that help people celebrate those environmental resource areas.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Liz, for your comments. So there's one comment that I received through email. Sorry, I just feel obligated to read it. It's somewhat out of context a little bit in some of the conversations we've had, but I will read that now. It's from Eric Schneider, 480 Puritan Road. He says, as a resident, I have a question and concerns about the recent decision by the Historic District Commission to require the town to remove a storage container from the Fisherman's Beach parking lot because the town did not timely apply for a permit from the HDC. I think we covered that was not accurate, but I'm reading this comment as written. I do not understand why a permit from this is back to the comment. I do not understand why a permit from the HDC was required for the temporary placement of a storage container in the parking lot. While the parking lot is certainly within the Fish House Historic District, the bylaws excludes temporary structures and buildings from the purview of the HDC, and quote, subject to the condition pertaining to the duration of existence and use, location, lighting, removal, and similar matters. End quote. Doesn't that mean that requiring the removal of a temporary structure or building is beyond the authority of the HDC, regardless of whether a permit is applied for? That being said, if the HDC has the authority to require the removal of any temporary structure or building within a local historic district for which no permit was obtained, then why, considering all the numerous temporary structures and buildings within the town's historic districts, was this ordinance enforced here but is otherwise seemingly ignored? One important function of town government, which includes the HDC, is a consistent and equal application of the law. This is not only required by principles of fairness, but also makes life predictable for residents and businesses. Here it appears that the ordinance is not equally and consistently enforced. However, if the HDC's decision is correct and will be consistently enforced hereafter, then almost any structure in the town's historic districts will require a permit. Structure, quote, is defined broadly, and temporary includes any structure for an existence for less than 1 year of a building in existence or a building in existence for less than 2 years. This overbroad application would lead to an absurd result and would put an incredible burden on the HDC and all residents living in a historic district. For instance, the HDC's position would arguably result in the shade tents at the farmers market requiring a permit, the porta potties at the Strawberry Festival requiring a permit, the tent used at Hadley School last year requiring a permit, or anybody setting up a tent in their yard requiring a permit, on and on. That cannot be how we expect to live. Again, I'm just reading a public comment that was submitted, and I wanted to submit that for the record. I think we covered a lot of that, and there's some misunderstanding on the HDC's jurisdiction, certainly throughout that comment that we discussed earlier. So with that, I think it's certainly time to move on, and we look forward. I think we'll just say that there'll be updates on potential sub-programs for this summer, and then we'll certainly be, I think, as a board, asking for updates on the future of sub-programs in Swampscott.
Neil, I just want to ask one question. Are we going to be having, I mean, do we have a goal of having a program this summer? Whether
We do. We have a goal of having some stand-up paddleboard offerings, but
a program where kids get
I'm
onto the board?
I'm not sure that we can commit to having a program for children, but we're gonna look to have a program. I'm not exactly sure what the parameters of the program will be, but staff are working on it right now. There's all sorts of regulatory responsibilities. This is not just run a program. You have to take into consideration all sorts of safety and training needs for staff, and we're working with some folks to help us.
So where would we keep those boards?
So I think, honestly, I think we should move on from this conversation.
Okay.
I think.
I want to, wait, I just want to have my question answered. Where would we?
So we're clearing out the lockers, and there's a good chance that those boards will be in the lockers.
I mean, but the point is, we don't know what that program is because they're still developing it. So where the boards are, what beach it's at, what it is, who does it, who can do it, how much it costs, those are all questions that
there's an
we
effort
can answer. But it's happening,
Mhm.
and I think we should move on because I think we spent a lot of time on it. So,
Thank you.
So moving on, the next item on our agenda is town administrator contract recommendations. These are.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a favor? I'm going to play the childcare card because I actually have to leave in the next half hour since I'm a single parent. God forbid I'm using the childcare card quite literally.
All right.
Someone's
All
being.
right, here
So
we
can
go.
we do the board and committee appointments, please? Out of order. And then,
Sure.
if that's all right.
Is that okay? Thanks for coming. Is that okay with everybody to do that?
Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to move to board and committee reappointments and appointments. We all received in our packet recommendations for reappointment for multiple committees and some appointments. I think there were some that, which is why Peter's bringing it up, that we may need to table, but do you want to just go through these maybe one at a time? And then we can take a motion for reappointment? Is that maybe the best way to do it?
Committee at a time?
Yeah, and then if there are ones that we want to table, we can just table them, and then if we're good with them, then we'll just approve the ones that we're good with?
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
So the first one is Andrews Chapel Oversight Committee, and it's Ann Quagliarello for a 3-year term seeking reappointment. Next page, tell me if I missed something. Conservation Commission, Monica Lagerquist is seeking reappointment to a 3-year term, and Scott Saunders is seeking a new appointment. I'll mention that all of these have gone through the process of, staff has looked through the current applications, the boards have made these recommendations.
And vetted through the town administrator. Thank you.
Yeah, correct.
Just to make clear, though, vetted through the town administrator. It's not like, I think there's a misconception that we all interview and.
Correct.
If you are a warm body and you'll show up and you'll volunteer your time, that's pretty much the criteria.
Right.
So is there a reason that we don't have, like, I'm looking at the Commission on Disability, and is there a reason that we only have one member?
We don't have applicants, so we gotta make a push on that.
Yeah.
There are.
We have 2 members.
Typically, these committees are difficult to sit because, we're looking for individuals that either have a disability or have a family member that has a disability, and it becomes a little bit of a challenge. We can work with a number of different groups, parents with children with some disabilities, and we'll continue to reach out and try to repopulate the committee.
Yeah.
I can tell you, like, when
it is important, and certainly, we'll redouble our efforts to try to.
Yeah, I think it's recruitment. I mean, I tried personally when you and I were first elected to try to
Get people?
recruit people for multiple boards and committees, but this is one because, again, it's been vacant for so long, but it's a challenging one to fill, which hopefully that's not the case, and maybe this conversation will spur.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully we can redouble our efforts and really get the word out and include that in future newsletters and talk about it. And I think if each one of us brought it up to 2 or 3 people, maybe we would be able to fill this.
Can I ask about the bullet points for each of these? There's a bullet point for each one of these committees says there are X applicants which are being reviewed for current vacancy. Is that current? Is that accurate? So, for example, on Disability Commission, are there 6 applicants and we're not ready to make any appointments? And again, there's specific requirements for most of these positions on disability, whereas normal boards, it's not the case. So, and then, for example, on Conservation Commission, it says there are 7 applicants which are being reviewed for current. So I just want to know, is that 7 minus, that includes the 2 people here, or that you chose from 7? I just want to understand how that.
It's 7 new people that we looked up. I went through the website and
Right.
pulled all of the applicants, and all of the boards, all of the chair people got a list of all of the applicants. Now they're going through them to see who they feel would be appropriate. They're probably going to call them into a meeting and introduce them.
Right, but so for example, on Conservation Commission, there's 2 vacancies remaining, so you're saying they're going to call those in. Got it. So on, okay, I got it. Thank you.
Yeah.
That's all.
So are you saying it's the committee is the committee is vetting the people and then they're sending it?
That is correct. Oh, sorry, thank you. Yes, that's correct.
Not to the exclusion of the town administrator.
That's right. Then
They have a chance to chime in if.
So I'm working with a couple of committee chairs or a couple of individuals, frankly, that I have not advanced, and most of them I have, but for reasons that I frankly discussed with the chair of the committees.
But the chair is just, you're giving them a courtesy of seeing them and saying, these are our needs, these are people that we think are good. They don't make the decision, you're ultimately making the decision.
That's right. I have to look at other standards for fitness and.
Okay, so moving on, Council on Aging, Maureen Callahan, 3-year term, reappointment. Marie, I don't know how to pronounce this name, Yanako Grant, seeking reappointment, 3-year term, and Molly Rowe, 3-year term.
So can I, just staying on the thing about, there's 14 pending applications, there's 1 vacancy, but we're reappointing the 3 people that wanted to be reappointing. One of our guidelines that we passed previously was about creating a mix of old and new, if you will, varying experiences and whatnot. So I just wonder, and again, I'm using this as an example, this has nothing to do with this committee or these appointees. I'm just wondering, Is that something, Sean, I'm sure you're thinking about it, but is that something that just because these 3 people sent their letter back saying they wanted to be reappointed, if we have 14 people, there's a lot of interest there, are we thinking about that, mixing old and new, and then are we also then redirecting those 14 and saying, hey, you're really interested in this? Well, this is kind of related. Are you interested in volunteering for this? Disability Commission being an example.
Yes.
That maybe is an offshoot of Council on Aging.
Peter, we have those ongoing conversations. I have a number of, just this past week, I spoke to an individual that wanted to serve on one committee, but expressed an interest or background for another, and I encourage them to, think about that another committee, because we just have a lot of interest in some committees and not enough in others. And but getting back to, just diversity, equity, inclusion, we have those conversations. We have sent a letter out to boards and committee chairs, and we do want a effort to reach out and see if we can, ensure that we are opening up access to some of these committees for a more robust effort on inclusion. Some of these individuals we've encouraged to serve at, as a non-voting member, for instance, just to open up a seat for a voting member to get some experience. But certainly we're working with committees committee chairs to keep continuity of some of their members as well, because that's an important part of some of the efforts to.
So I'm sorry, I just gone through, last comment on this, I had gone through them and I don't see any place where an existing member wanted to be reappointed, that they weren't reappointed in favor of someone else. So everyone that's wanting to be reappointed is being reappointed, even if there are 10 applicants for it. And which is fine, if that's the process, right? But it's also, if there's 10 applicants in the wings, it just doesn't evidence that thing that you just talked about. So maybe we're just in the initial stages of figuring that out.
Well, but then that would apply to what we just talked about. So the Conservation Commission, if you have X amount of people that are signed up and waiting, and you're going to approve somebody, I mean, what you're saying would apply to everything here, except for
It would.
Chapel.
Conservation Commission has vacancies, though. So the ones I was specifically talking about just a second ago are committees that don't have vacancies, but all the people that wanted to be reappointed got reappointed, and there's a quote-unquote waiting list, just to make sure that we vetted those to be able to say, hey, it was great that you're volunteering already, but if you've been volunteering for 20 years and we have so much interest in a committee,
Right.
there's generationally perhaps other experiences or other things, and that just was something the board talked about.
Right, but that does put the Conservation Commission in that, because there is a reappointment, there's a request for reappointment, and there's also 7 people, there's 7 applications.
No, I understand, but there's also a vacancy, which they're still vetting for that vacancy. I'm just differentiating the ones with vacancies versus not.
Okay.
There's just nowhere here where I see evidence of us switching out. And that may be okay. Substantively, it may be totally the right recommendation. I'm just want to make sure that we're actually vetting that, as opposed to just reappointing because someone wants to be reappointed. Because I think there are a lot of people, we hear quite often from people say, I would love to get involved with this, and they find it hard to get a foot in the door. And again, this is a great problem to have. It's because of committees we don't have any people for, right? And so we've got to work to get those. So it's just an observation. I'm sorry, Katie, you were going to say something.
No, I was just going to say, I understand that there are terms, but then are there term limits on any of these committees? So you can, every 3 years, come up, and as long as you're reappointed, you're fine.
The Cultural Council is the only one that statutorily has limits. I think it's 2 terms, and you can be off a term, and then you can be reappointed. But I think the Cultural Council, by statute, has a limitation in how many consecutive terms you can serve.
Thank you.
So, Cultural Council, there are 3 members seeking reappointment: Carolina Velasquez, Samia Tui, and Martha Cesars. There are, I think, there are a lot of potential members for that council, so there are multiple vacancies, and it looks like there are some applications that need to be reviewed. Earth Removal Advisory Committee, 2 seeking reappointment, Tony Banderwitz and Gary Barden, with, it says 2 applications that don't fit the requirements of the vacancy, because the vacancy on that committee is for an excavating engineer. It's a non-voting member of that committee. Hadley School Reuse Advisory Committee, it looks like every member of that is seeking reappointment. And those, if I recall, I mean, many of them were appointed, right?
Yeah.
By moderator and the select board and.
Yes,
sort of
they're not all of our appointments.
What's that?
They're not our appointments.
Right.
We actually have the vast minority. I think we have 3, maybe, total appointments.
Right, so we couldn't reappoint.
We can't actually do Hadley tonight.
Right.
Because only 3 of these are our appointments to begin with.
So we'll table Hadley. Does that make sense? Or should we reappoint the ones that?
We don't know which
Do
ones
we know
are
which
our 3.
ones?
I don't know which ones are our 3. I don't know
Yeah.
which ones we appointed.
Yeah, I know one of them for sure, but I wouldn't want to guess. So we'll table Hadley. Harbor and Waterfront Advisory Committee, there are 4 members seeking reappointment. Alan this one I think we're tabling, right? Because there's a potential
Please.
residency question.
Yep.
So I think we're going to table that. And
What do you mean,
if someone seeking reappointment is not a resident,
oh, okay.
so we have that situation, I think, on,
Well, this also has 13 applicants.
right. So I think that,
Appoint them if they're not a resident.
right, well, I think we need to have that conversation,
Yeah,
because it occurs on another, I think there's another instance, maybe one other one of that, so I just want to have that conversation. So, Harbor Master, nothing, sorry, that's
I
nothing.
don't think that's a committee.
Yeah, it's just on the list. Historic District Commission, 3 seeking reappointment, Richard Smith, Jared Jerma, Stacy Reiling, as an alternate, 3-year terms.
I would ask us to table this one, please.
Okay,
Why?
Because I would like to ask the town administrator some more questions about it offline.
okay, I mean, we can table that. Historical Commission, there are 4 seeking reappointment, Justina Oliver, Jonathan Lehman, Justina Oliver, Brad Graham, and Ryan Judkins. I think, Peter, you pointed out that Justina,
Yeah, can we table this one as well and figure that out?
okay.
Thank you. There's just a term question.
There's just a term question on that one, if it's a reappointment for a 3-year or not. So we'll table that for now. Sorry. Open Space and Recreation. 3 seeking reappointment, Brian Longan, Tanya Lilick, and Sierra Poe Munoz. 3-year terms.
And this has 17 applicants?
It looks like.
Oh,
People care about open space and rec.
They do. And there's a vacancy, so. The Recreation Commission, Janelle Cameron and Carolina Velasquez are seeking reappointment to 3-year terms. Also has some applicants that need to be reviewed. Renewable Energy Committee, David Zalanowski, seeking reappointment to a 3-year term. I think we can do that tonight, but I think, I know that there's someone else, Diane, that was seeking appointment that so we can do David tonight, but I think there's another person who the Renewable Energy Committee was hoping to be appointed.
yes, I
to
got
their
that email
committee.
today.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I think we can reappoint David and then deal with that with the other two vacancies. Solid Waste Advisory Committee, so Polly Tickham's listed here as seeking reappointment, but she's not seeking reappointment. She was.
I think she is. I think.
No, I talked to her over the
Sure?
weekend. Yeah, she said she was initially interested in potentially serving, not as the select board member, but just as a resident member of
Call her?
the committee. Yeah, I confirmed it with her. So she's not seeking reappointment, but everyone else is. So if we take that one up, I don't think we need to table it, but just take it up with the revision that it wouldn't include Polly, and it would include Emily Silly, Jonathan Gold, Wayne Spritz, and Emily Westhoven for 1-year terms.
Okay, I have a quick question. On committees, I know on this committee, sometimes they have an issue with having a quorum. Is there any possibility of adding alternates onto a committee that sometimes has an issue?
I think we could, but I would suggest maybe that's another conversation when we revisit some of these. Maybe we can bring that up and, offline, think about which ones those are and make sure that that's something that they want to.
Okay.
But yeah. Traffic Study Advisory Committee, Linda Hayes, 1-year term, seeking reappointment. And
Can I just ask, what's the timing on, there's so many vacancies. So I appreciate we're doing reappointments in June. That's awesome, because we haven't done that in 5 years. But we're just reappointing mostly. We're not really appointing anybody new. And so traffic, for example, I didn't realize we had 2 vacancies for the community member seats. So we only have 1 community member with town staff currently on that committee, right? And the point was to make sure we had community member voice there. So I'm just using that as an example. So what's your time frame for when you want these to come back to us and we're going to be filling vacancies?
I'd like another month, and I think we can, take a look at, trying to figure out if any of these new applicants can really help us with the DEI composite of some of the committees. I think we can reach back out to the chairs and really get a sense of their effort to help us ensure that we are continuing to bring in new citizens into these committees, and we can give the board members a chance to talk about any of their particular concerns about the committees that they would have. So sometime probably the beginning of August, I think we can circle back around.
okay. Water and Sewer Rate Advisory Committee, myself, Charlie Patzios, and Ralph Supay, 1-year term, all seeking reappointment. And then on the Zoning Board of Appeals, Brad Croft is seeking a reappointment.
That's the one that we're going to table as well.
Table that?
Yeah.
That's ZBA?
Yeah, because of the waiver of residency.
Okay. So it looks to me like if someone could I would entertain a motion to accept the town administrator's recommendations for reappointment with the revision that we table the Hadley Reuse Committee, the Harbor Waterfront Advisory Committee, Historic District Commission, Historic Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, and that on the Solid Waste Advisory Committee, that we remove Polly Tickham in that recommendation.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? No. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great, thanks, and thank you, Diane, for continuously going through all these details. I know it's tedious, but incredibly important.
Diane, I've had people say that they put in an application and they've never even heard a response. But I think it was before you even came. So do people get responses now, or?
I think that's something that Pete and I are probably going to start talking about. We've been talking about the vacancies and the applicants and all of that.
Because is there a chance that it might say you have 13 applicants, but maybe those were like a year and a half ago and they're not?
Some of them are really old. Yep.
Right, so
I
they're
don't
not
have a
even
lot of new
interested.
ones.
Okay.
Yeah, I think so, in this process over the next month, I think part of that would be to weed out some of these like legacy applications that may not even, I mean, these people may not live here anymore, you know, so we know a more accurate number too as we're going through it. But yeah, and I think that's been an issue ever since I became involved, and it's something that we need to address for sure, is just like the communication of letting people know that their application's been received, and you know, all of that, I think, has been something that has been a real challenge.
It's why I'm on the select board, to be honest, because I couldn't figure out how to use the committee and boards tool on the
So you
website.
ran.
So I ran.
You found it
for
easier to run.
It's
You
easier
found it easier to
run for the
volunteer.
select board.
That's amazing.
So,
That's an interesting
some insight
solution.
there. Also, may I make a suggestion that the town administrator put some of this information in his report that we have, just to understand what what committees have true vacancies and not are like waiting with applications to be filled, but actually don't have applicants.
Yeah.
That way we can constantly be engaging the public to fill those true vacancies.
We need to come up with a different way to actually just market all of these committees and make them present to residents in ways that help them really feel like if they join these committees, they can bring ideas into reality. I think that's you know, what we're missing. I think a lot of folks just think that it's just a place to pass time, but you could be part of a team that actually buys a piece of waterfront property, or you can help figure out how to build a new park, or deal with an environmental resource challenge that really would make this town and frankly the Commonwealth that much more successful.
Sean, we need to put the foundation in first. We need to make sure that we're just blocking and tackling and responding to emails first and foremost. I mean, this is probably one of the biggest functions that we have as a town, and one of our biggest responsibilities is engaging with volunteers. And there's no reason that emails should be, you know,
we have the letters that everybody gets sent. We have it all, like it's already in place. We just have to get back to making sure that it's routine. And
right, but there is a systemic problem. I mean, like, and I actually mean system here, meaning I think at some point we started using technology, and then I don't know that we really have updated and fully utilized technology. Right? We have see it, click it, fix it, and we like to use that for a lot of things, including complaining about blasts at the quarry. But that's not what it's really designed for. We talked about having something created for complaints. It hasn't happened yet. The application process for volunteers goes somewhere, but there's not even an auto reply to the person when they submit it, which that's just basic technology at this point. Even if it still was to go nowhere, just thank you, we've got your email and we put it in a box. Right. But you know, I mean, just even simple things like that. And I hear you hired someone recently that likes technology quite a bit and likes using technology in government, so maybe that's something. But I just think as though that's just low-hung fruit for us, which is people I just think feel really disrespected inadvertently, but understandably, when they don't hear back when they're offering their time. And Katie's a perfect example. She ran for office because of it. So if we can just explore other things. I just think some of our services are antiquated now. They were great, good to do it, but there's got to be better systems.
Sure.
I just want to be clear, I wasn't ignored. I couldn't use the website. So this is somewhat also user error. But I just
could have
want to
been
be clear.
your technology issues. I mean, let's be honest. I mean,
Right.
Yeah.
So next on the agenda is the town administrator contract recommendations. Sean, if you want to, I think you have a summary presentation to provide.
I don't have the PowerPoint, but I can kind of go over that, you know, in specific. So we have the contract for Chief Ruben Quesada. Chief has recently joined the town, and I'm recommending a 3-year contract with a 2-year extension. His contract in year 1 would be $140,000, year 2, $142,800, and year 3, $145,656. This contract would run from, thank you, March 28th, 2022 to June 30th, 2025. There's a 2-year extension clause. There's clothing allowance up to $1,500, and the town will provide a command vehicle and a pension bonus of $10,000. I'm recommending a contract for our library director, Jonathan Lewis Nichols, for year 1 at $100,000, year 2 at $102,000, year 3 for $104,040, with a retention bonus of $5,000. Another contract for our building commissioner, year 1 at $80,000, year 2 at $82,400, year 3 at $84,872. He will also receive an additional annual stipend of $10,000 for the assistant facilities director position and a retention bonus of $10,000. That contract will run from March 28th, 2022 to June 30th, 2025. The next contract is for Jared LaLiberte, our town clerk. This contract, year 1 would be $80,000, year 2 at $83,200, year 3 at $85,850, and this contract would run from April 25th, 2022 to June 30th, 2025. The next contract is for the assistant town administrator and our HR director, S. Peter Kane. Year 1 would be $100,000, year 2 would be $102,000, year 3 would be $104,040, year 4 would be $106,121, year 5 would be $108,243. It includes a retention bonus of $15,000 at the end of year 3, $7,500 at the end of year 4, and $7,500 at the end of year 5. And the last contract is for our recreation director, Danielle Strauss. Year 1 would be $77,875, year 2 would be $80,000, year 3 would be $82,000. This contract would run from July 1st, 2022 to June 30th, 2025. These are 6 contracts that ultimately help us ensure that we have multi-year contracts with key department heads. This wraps up a series of contracts that we've approved over the last 3 months that really, I think, position the town well in terms of retention, and certainly ensures that we have a team of really dedicated department heads to continue to advance important goals for the town. Happy to answer any questions the board may have.
Any questions on these contracts? Comments?
Well, I'm going to repeat my comment from earlier. I don't want to see contracts coming out after an employee has already started working, and I really, I want to make sure that when we're in a position of bringing a new person on, that they go through the process, they're given a contract before they start. Within the contract, if there's any type of issues, there's a period of time that issues can be vetted, and then you can move on from there. I voiced this earlier in a executive session, but I just want to be in public on that. And I also want to make sure that when we do have positions, that positions are vetted to the point, or actually they're advertised to the point where people of all different backgrounds, diversities, have an opportunity to apply. That is super, super important. So, and then on the last thing, I am not a fan of 5-year contracts. We do have one 5-year here. However, this is in the purview of the town administrator, and I do support the town administrator's decisions. I'm just hoping that he'll make some changes in the future. That's my comment.
Thanks, Mary Ellen. Any other comments or questions?
I echo Mary Ellen's comment, which I had also made earlier about the process being that contracts should come first to us so that we understand employment. It seemed a little bit backwards to have them come to select board and say we've hired these folks and then get contracts after the fact that are now post-dated. So I echo Mary Ellen's sentiments there.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. If anyone has a motion to approve the town administrator's contract recommendations as described?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, or any more discussion? Are all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. So I think maybe, why don't we do the land use planning? We'll just go in order. I'm just trying to think of the easiest way to do this, but there is no easy way. So so the next item on our agenda is land use planning, community engagement processes and timelines. I met with Sean and P. Kane and Marzi Galaska, our Director of Community Development and Planning. I think that was last week or a couple weeks ago, and had a conversation about just wanting to communicate to the select board and get some sort of consensus or people's ideas on what processes should start happening to better prepare us for what I see as there are like multiple initiatives happening, all of which that we've described as, robust community engagement. I think that much of that will be really occurring in the fall, but that requires us to actually have a conversation now and get things going and tee these things up. And I think that they are all, in many ways, there are separate initiatives, but there's interplay between them. And so I wanted to have at least our initial conversation tonight about specifically about the Hawthorne property reuse and that process, the Hadley reuse process, which is a little more straightforward, and then included in that conversation the Mass Housing Choice Initiative, which is the new zoning that requires housing within distance of MBTA locations, and then our planned for and hoped for land use summit in the fall. This presentation was shared with the planning board. They have a meeting tonight, and they're going to discuss some of this tonight. They'll be an integral part of this process for all of these initiatives, and we'll certainly be engaging with them. So I don't think necessarily there are any specific decisions or votes to be made tonight, but I think that if we can give staff a sense of the direction to be heading in, and like if we agree with this timeline or where we may differ, that would be helpful, because again, I don't think we can wait our next regular meeting being July 20th, like that, we need to issue RFIs, potentially RFPs, and so people need to start working on it. So with that, I think I'll turn it over. Am I turning it over to Marzi or Pete?
I'm happy to quickly start the discussion and maybe turn it over to Pete to really break down the time frame. So again, this is really building on to discussion and the sort of continuation and the need for a land use summit that this board has expressed, and then we have talked about for just recently or for quite some time. As you know, we have this tremendous opportunity and a need to really plan for our future, really engage our community, engage all of our stakeholders to really look at some of the key parcels and probably the largest development within the town of Swampscott. You see some of the background. As you know, the select board identified holding a land use summit as one of your goals. This has been done a while back. This was also identified by various boards, including the Finance Committee, including the Planning Board, obviously as part of the master planning process, and other committees such as the Open Space and Recreation Planning Committee. So the parcels that Neil had talked about, including the Hawthorne redevelopment of Hadley, as well as the MBTA legislation of the Mass Housing Choice Initiatives, are all somewhat intertwined, and it's really great for us to really engage all of our community stakeholders this summer to really try to plan for community engagement, community process, and find out how do we move forward with the redevelopment of the parcels. So just to go back, obviously the purpose and the goals of the summit would be to engage the community and really try to find out what is the outcome that we wanted to achieve. At the same time, I think it would be great to really educate our public and educate all of the boards regarding the functions of the separate boards. We understand what the planning board does, we might understand what the ZBA does, but also to see how do we work together, how is the process cohesive, and how do we move forward with redevelopment of some of our key parcels. So as you know, right now, we have the sort of like the two or potentially three large initiatives or redevelopment options, and also others, not included in the list of projects that's there, the additional 2 parcels, open space parcels on Archer Street, and that's also a tremendous opportunity for the town to look at the redevelopment opportunities of those 2 parcels, and also how do we link them together, right? How do we plan for the use of these parcels, and also look at the benefits and just the synergy that our land use board has. So we had worked out a sort of a big picture time frame, as well as the process of how we should move forward with the initiatives. So you can see that the overall large land use summit would include identification of goals and the purposes. We will do a great outreach or marketing of the program. We will identify location and timing when this should happen. Obviously, I think it would be important and really valuable to the process to make sure that we can engage all of our stakeholders, all of our boards, and really have a productive, participatory planning process that would really assist us with the reuse of those parcels. In regards to the Hawthorne property, would love to hear from you, your thought process in regards to our timeline that we have identified, in regards to soliciting for a request for proposals and or seeking a request for increase or interest from planning entities and planners to really help us with the process. This is something that, we really see the value in having participatory process that's really engages the community, and we hear from all of the stakeholders in the community. Obviously, that's something else. We will go through the process, and we would share all of the information with town meeting, as was promised during the last town meeting regarding this parcel and obviously others. Same thing with the Hadley. Would also like to hear from you in regards to the process that you would like us to follow. As you recall, we had a very successful process for the Michon, but the Michon also identified a use from the very beginning. So I think the process potentially could be a little bit different. The Hadley Reuse Committee did provide to us recommendations for potential uses, so that's something else that would love to hear from you. If this should be a request for proposal for one use, should we really open it up to seek from for any type of a reuse of the parcels. And obviously the housing choice legislation, you have heard from our planning board chair several meetings ago in regards to what the process might look like. At this point, we still need to hear a little bit more, or we're looking for additional guidance from the Department of Housing and Community Development. That's the state agency that is providing communities with time frame, also some additional guidance to see how the legislation should roll out. What is it that each community should be doing? So I think that's sort of like the key steps. I think that Pete will go over the actual time frame of each of the individual parcels.
So thank you, Marcy. We put together some rough ideas about what those major milestones would be in each one of these 3 main projects, but also how they interrelate with the Land Use Summit, so you can see it all together in one. These are just rough concepts, generally when you go out to RFP or RFI, you give those general milestones that you want to achieve, but obviously the respondent is going to provide their very specific project proposal and schedule. So this is just to give you a general idea of what we would want to include in our timeline with that RFP. So as you'll recall, for the Hawthorne property, town meeting approved the acquisition this June. So we would look at possibly doing an RFP process, searching for a consultant to assist us in putting together proposals for the Hawthorne property, and that process would take place in July and August, likely developing the RFP and releasing it in July with responses coming in and interviews in August, so that you can have the consultant begin in September. With that initial work, granted it would be a month, likely a month, being able to come to the land use summit, explain what they've been able to acquire for information, and what they anticipate their steps to be. That way, essentially using the land use summit as a jumping board to getting the project started, but also getting the community activated in taking part in this. That would then follow with the consultant doing multiple meetings, outreach, development of project ideas throughout the winter, so that a public forum could be held towards the end of the winter in February. At that time, they would present multiple options to the community. That would be the opportunity for the community members to see what those options are, give feedback, as well as give us an idea of which ones should we focus on, in order to then bring those focused options to a presentation to town meeting at the annual town meeting in May. Then with that presentation and any additional feedback during the summer months, we would put together a final public forum on what would hopefully be a final option in September. That would then allow enough time for the consultant to refine that final option to bring it forward for that desired town meeting vote in the fall, if that's a November or October fall town meetings.
And Pete, I just want to make sure it's clear, like when we talk about final option, it's like the option for the use of the property. It's not a specific plan, et cetera, necessarily. It's just because, as we all recall, and if the public's not aware, that, town meeting needs to approve any other use other than the use there now.
Correct.
Or maybe parking for school and public. So that's when we say final option. That doesn't mean in September we know exactly what's happening, but we're approving.
We don't have construction
the general category of that use.
Correct.
At that point. Thanks. Sorry, I just wanted to make sure that was.
No, thank you for that. Yeah. For the second project, this is the Hadley reuse. We've only scoped in the 2022 schedule here, and so that is the RFI or RFP process, again, in the summer months, this summer, July and August. Receipt of what those proposals or interests are in September, allowing us to review those submittals. That way we can then present those at the land use summit. And from that land use summit and the feedback of that land use summit based on the interest that we receive, or the proposals that we receive, that would be when we then determine what those next steps are. It's hard to determine what the long-term steps are when we haven't decided on the particular use. So that's why we would look at the responses and the information that we receive from the summit in order to make that decision in November.
So Pete, quick question. Previously, before you were here, we had mentioned a timeline, and we had talked about the RFI process for the Hadley reuse, and it was the recommendation that maybe we wait until outside of the summer months, maybe early fall, to start this, simply because the responses for the to the RFI may be lesser in the summertime. Any thought or guidance?
There's always the truth that, it could be summer that we're not going to get the responses. We might not get responses during the winter. There may not be an optimal time to get responses. What we're trying to work with is, if we know that we want the land use summit in the fall and we want it to be prior to the holiday season, it has to be in October.
Yep.
If we want material to present to the community do we do the process now, or do we decide maybe Hadley isn't part of the land use summit, or we just do a tease to it that this is what's coming up? Obviously, all of this can certainly be moved around, but it's trying to decide what do we want to be able to include in that summit. Yeah, but you bring up a good point. We can't say for certain that the summer is the best time, or is it the worst time?
It's a time.
A time, yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I would say, I mean, I think that this reflects that past conversation. I mean, this process, other than the potential timing of when the RFI is issued, but in terms of the next step of putting the RFI together based on the Hadley reuse report, I think that when we talked about that, the idea was that Peter and I, because we are on the Hadley reuse, part of the Hadley reuse committee, that we would work with Marzi, or, you know, staff would be putting that together, but we would work with them and then bring something back to the board. And then when we issue it, I certainly think we can have a discussion, revisit that, like what may make the most sense, and like, is it a priority to have all this information in the land use summit? Maybe it doesn't need to be. I think that the land use summit will have a full agenda no matter what we include. But I think that, again, the important part tonight is sort of like the idea that everyone agrees that this work should start, you know, over the summer. Thanks.
And then the third item that Marzi had mentioned is the Mass Housing Choice Initiative. So again, a rough schedule that we're looking at here is the potential of establishing a task force. So whether that's the select board creating the task force or the planning board creating a task force, essentially the idea could be that a task force is created that includes multiple members from various land use boards and the Affordable Housing Trust, in order to help guide this process, get the guidance from the Commonwealth as to what this regulation will be and how we'll be implementing it, as well as evaluating the community where we currently are in our density and how that relates to whatever the requirement is. And so with that establishment, being able to do the research in August and September, get that up and running so that some initial findings and recommendations, as well as getting feedback, can be presented at that land use summit, utilizing the land use summit to present what this means to the community and what could be coming forward, and then allowing the task force and staff to put together a bylaw, the zoning bylaw, that could then go to a public forum in February, allowing for a potential adoption at the Maytown meeting. Again, really rough schedule, but just giving you how it could sequence. And so finally, looking at the big picture timeline of how these three projects relate to the summit.
Wait, Pete, I have a quick question.
Oh, sure.
It was my understanding that anything under the 3A or mass housing was really in the wheelhouse of the planning board.
Any zoning falls under planning board direction, that's correct.
So wouldn't they be the ones just taking the steering wheel here and saying?
They can do that. This was a recommendation. It's not that it's a requirement that it has to be a task force. It's, again, we're giving out ideas and recommendations.
The idea, I would say the idea of having a task force came from when we were briefed by the chair of the planning board with Marzi on this. The one time we were briefed, it was introduced by a resident, and then if I recall correctly, the chair of the planning board agreed with the idea that a task force would be helpful in this. And so that's why it didn't come out of nowhere or from me. That came from that meeting. I think that task force could certainly be established, like Pete mentioned, it could be established by the planning board. But the idea is that with that conversation we had at that one meeting when we were briefed on it, this is a really heavy lift. Right. And they need all the help they can get. The planning board certainly would be the board
steering it.
Yeah, and is sort of the decision maker, but I think it requires sort of more resources and outside help, and that includes potential residents. My one thought on this, which I'm interested in hearing other people's response, is that, like, I think this task force could also be helpful in helping plan for the land use summit, because the housing initiative, we're not going to have the details to that necessarily immediately, but I think we need to form this group, and that the land use summit requires feedback from all of these different boards that will essentially be represented, theoretically on this task force. So I think that the task force could serve that purpose as well, which would, I think, be helpful. I don't want to create work or, death by 1,000 committees, but I think it might be helpful to have a separate group with those representatives working on that rather than the plan for the land use summit going, it's almost like liaisons from every committee.
I definitely agree with you, Neil, but I think that we should be a little bit maybe definitive in regards to what's the outcome, what are the goals for the land use summit, right? Because when you think of the land use summit, it just, this can go in so many different ways. There's so many things that we can look at. But I wonder if we kind of sort of, maybe scale it, not scale it down, but maybe start off with smaller steps, and then maybe try to figure out try to break it down into maybe information gather, not gathering, but maybe sharing, kind of just informing everybody in regards to what do our land use boards do? How do they govern the redevelopment process, right? And then maybe just look at the specific parcels that we have versus looking at the overall on a larger scale. But at the same time, I want to make sure that a planning board, as you know, that's really their charge. We work with the planning board. I just want to make sure that they really lead the process, and then they really are the representatives, or the just lead on it.
Sure.
And really sort of work through the process.
Yeah, no, I agree with all of that.
And then I just had a point of clarification to Marzi. We talk about stakeholders and we talk about boards. Are we talking about resident stakeholders, or are we talking about inviting some of these large property owners to this committee as well, so they can be a part of this process?
I think it's an overall. You're absolutely right. It's the overall process, right? So we want to make sure that we have all the key people at the table. We want to hear from them, because, if we look at change of zonings or try to create any type of initiatives, if we don't have the buy-in from the landowners or from the property owners, it's really an exercise in planning, right? Which is really great. We might want to see something at some parcels, but yet really don't have the buy-in from the property owners. That it's really not a successful plan, or how do we carry it out too?
No, I think that's great to hear. I think we've done some of those things in the past where we've had these exercises, and I just want to make sure that we're going to do everything that we can to have these large property owners as part of this as well.
Absolutely, and that would be our goal, to make sure that we engage them and really have a thoughtful participatory process through the entire sort of this land use summit.
Thank you for specifying.
Sorry, was there?
Nope, go ahead.
So that brings us to the final, this is just so you can visually see the big picture of all the land use summit and the 3 projects, and how they're running concurrently, and the interrelatedness of those projects. It's just a repeat of the same information, but just brought together. But happy to answer any other questions you might have, or any other thoughts. If you feel like, if the board really does feel like the RFP processes for both Hawthorne and Hadley, or just one of those, should hold off, if we should wait until later, that the summer is not the optimal time, we're happy to make any adjustments.
I'm okay moving forward, Pete. I was just simply bringing it up as something that I didn't mention
worthwhile
previously.
concern, so I just want to make sure that we're all.
I think if we're working towards that October date, we would need to start the process sooner rather than later.
Yeah.
On the RFP process for the consultant, who will put together the RFP as far as the information of what you want in that RFP?
So that would be a collaboration of staff, so Marzi and I would work on that together. And then.
Will the planning board be involved in that?
Absolutely, yes. the RFP. And then obviously we will share the RFP with you, you know, and seek your comments on it as well. And then the other part is that too, that we can check, go back to town council and really try to find out, because as you know, engineering services, planning services, and retaining of those individuals or consultants to do that work, that's exempt from Chapter 40B. So we technically don't have to go out to bid. We could really solicit or just request proposals and really have a internal scoring process or maybe interview process to seek the best consultants to assist us with the process.
So RFP process, I mean, that we could just substitute that for procurement process, you know, developing, hiring somebody essentially in the, of course, legally,
Right.
you know, legal way. But I think that, so I think that as far, if we take it piece by piece, if people can sort of say, we don't have to we're not taking a vote on this necessarily, but just sort of like the sense of the board for next steps, so staff has a good idea. It's like, I feel like what will be helpful ideally at our next meeting is if we had some draft idea of what, you know, either a request for proposal or, you know, like who are we trying to hire? Like what is the description of that, and sort of get that sense for the Hawthorne one, right? And then I think in that meeting in July, we could also have more conversation about timing of that. And then I think in the meantime, I also think that conversations can be had about like what a task force might look like, you know, talking to the planning board. So we could come back in July, potentially revisit that, like a little bit more of an idea of what that might be. Similarly with the RFI for Hadley, I mean, we could potentially have some work done on that at that point. But if everyone feels like, I don't know if I'm missing something, but if everyone feels like these are reasonable, high level, like this is the direction we should go in, then I think it'd be good to just let Marzi and Pete know that so they can move forward.
I just have one question for Marzi. So how, on the Hawthorne property and then on the Hadley, is there a thought that these two should be tied in or just looked at organically? I mean, because they're so close, and like, how does that?
I think, you know,
What's the thought process on that?
Mary Ellen, that's something else that, you know, it's a great question, and I think that's something else that we really need to explore a little bit further, right? Because we want to see what are the synergies between the two,
right?
And how does one support the other, or what is it that we wanted to see for the Humphrey Street, you know, the streetscape, and then how does that work? So I just think that would be all part of the process. So I am glad that, you know, when we look at the land use summit, that we did include Hadley as part of this process, so then we can really engage our community and, you know, with the use of a consultant, really narrow it down to see what, you know, the best and the highest, or potentially just you know, what's the ideal land use for both of those parcels.
So it would be the same, we'd hire one consulting group and they would look at both of these things to.
I don't think so.
Well,
No?
but I see one consultant to help us with the land use summit. That would be one consultant. But I think that you would, after that, I think you should really break it down and really look at it parcel by parcel, and really bring in the consultant that could best assist us with the process and with the use.
so there's probably any number of scenarios, any number of consultants, any number of budgets. And so I think our task is going to be, over the next few weeks, coming back with something that really makes the most sense in terms of, you know, each of these pieces. And there's certainly, you know, when you look at the Hawthorne or the Hadley, these iconic properties shape Humphrey Street.
Right.
And, you know, there will be synergies. The future use of both of these properties will not be independent. You know, they'll affect everything along that corridor.
Right.
So, you know, we're going to have to kind of have a holistic kind of approach. We've talked about, you know, the Hawthorne really needs a national type of idea. We have to get the best and biggest idea that we can find, and typically we have to find, folks that can help us really think as broadly as possible. There's never been a better time in terms of state or federal funding opportunities and partnerships, and our ability to kind of work with our state and federal delegation. I had a conversation with Congressman Moulton just a week and a half ago, and his team is working on this, and we're excited to really kind of figure out where can we, get those partnerships that can help us make the most of this critical conversation at this moment in time for Swampscott. Lots of work, though. This is not a small effort to kind of pull together. Marzi had talked about, be interesting to just talk about what do each of these boards do, land use boards, and what's the important role that they can play in shaping, the reuse or the future of all of these important properties and responsibilities. So I think there'll be some amazing conversations. That task force is going to be needed just to do some of the groundwork and just to start to clear the deck so we can have the critical conversation about these important issues.
I just think too, it's important to understand that we've already had conversations about Hadley without the context of Hawthorne. So that maybe the context of Hadley changes or it differs now as the Hawthorne property use comes to light. So I think that's what Mary Ellen is sort of getting at, right? Like nothing happens in a vacuum, and that there.
No, I just wanted to make sure that we were thinking about them not as two separate individual lots, but the Hadley Committee has put out a ton of information as far as all different ideas on it. Yeah, a lot of options. It's just, if you go with that option, I just want to make sure that we're not.
What are the implications with one option?
Yeah,
compared to the other?
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what I mean. It's not in a silo.
Yeah, and that's,
Yeah.
exactly, and that's sort of the point. That's yeah, totally agree. That's well, not just the summit, but just getting this planning started, because there are all these separate initiatives that are all intertwined. And so like they need to be talked about together, but they also, at some point, we need to have some efforts happening for each of them. But I think especially the Hawthorne community engagement process will include conversations about Hadley. I mean, it's impossible not to do that.
Right.
So.
And just to let you know, and that is something that the planning board, that was their goal, to undertake that this summer. They started to sort of slowly plan for it, but obviously now that we're working together in collaboration on it, so this is something that,
Yeah, and we talked to the planning board chair today, and I think we'll, certainly be more engaged with them and let them, to your point, Mary Ellen, lead on much of this. So that's really important that they are integral part of leading this conversation. So I think that's all I wanted to just make sure we cover, and just seeing like the month of July almost feeling like it's over already before it even starts. I just wanted to tee that up and get people feeling comfortable with the next steps, and it feels like everyone is, so that's great. I really appreciate you all sticking around for this meeting tonight and putting all that information together, so thanks a lot.
Thank you.
So that leaves us, I think, with the utilization of American Rescue Plan Act ARPA funds for some employee compensation that is coming out of a request of the select board originally. And Sean, I don't, if you want to maybe pick up on this.
Sure. A few, frankly, months ago, we had a conversation about a number of collective bargaining contracts for our public works department, police department, and fire department that we identified American Rescue Plan funds for at our annual town meeting. Board asked me to go back and look at non-union employees that have done extraordinary work through the pandemic over the last 2 years, continue to meet and discuss ways to help protect the community. As many board members may know, during the first year of the pandemic, we had daily meetings at 9 o'clock every day. We had staff that were working around the weekends and dealing with the threat that COVID brought to our world. I couldn't be prouder of the dedication and the work that all of our town public safety staff and frankly our town staff put into meeting some of these extraordinary demands. With that, one of the ways that we can utilize American Rescue Plan funds is for replacement revenue, and I'm recommending to the board that we use $413,394,000 of ARPA funds as follows: $40,000 for our Public Works Union, $175,644 for the Police Union, $15,000 for the Administrative Professional Union, $80,000 for our Fire Department Union, and $102,750 for non-union personnel. All of the collective bargaining contracts have been approved at annual town meeting, but having the board vote to authorize the expenditure of $413,394 will help ensure that we're compliant with federal regulations. And Amy Sarro, our Director of Finance and Administration, is here to speak to her work to try to help manage the regulatory responsibilities with these ARPA dollars. She has been in regular communication with Eric Kinsheft, CPA, that has been working with the town of Swampscott, but also with 20 or so other communities, and has some pretty rigorous knowledge with regard to the financial utilization of these funds. So with that, Amy, could you provide just a quick update on that and share some insights?
Yeah, so I want to be very careful with the wording to make sure this qualifies. But yeah, so Sean and I went through after the board's recommendation that we take a look at non-union staff to really focus on who was here through the bulk of the pandemic, working full-time in the office. We did have a cutoff on dates so that it did encompass the employees who were there through the bulk of the pandemic and not people who were hired as things were, 90% normal.
When was that?
Are we there yet?
Are we there? Yeah.
It was an optimistic 90. So we really wanted to take a focus on that and also look at, the impact that the pandemic had on these individuals, as well as the impact that these individuals had on the town through the pandemic as well, between, like Sean said, the daily meetings, everything that came along with it in terms of like CARES regulation, obviously our public health nurse and our health director, and our emergency management director taking the bulk of the brunt of this. But it was something that was really important. It was something that we had staff reach out asking if we were going to be doing something because other communities were. And, everyone's hired and they worked a lot, and they were just hoping the town would be doing something to just recognize that. So I feel very strongly this is a good use of our funding, especially since it's such a small percentage overall of our award, that we can do something impactful for our staff and still be able to utilize the funds to do something impactful for our community.
So just so I'm clear, so this is money above what they're daily compensation is? This is like a bonus?
It is, yep,
Yep.
one-time bonus.
So one-time bonus,
Yes, we can't use the word bonus.
okay.
It is one-time supplemental compensation. So yes.
But it's outside of their salary.
All right, all right, and what, did you bring this to the finance, did the finance committee also say, yeah, this is a great idea, or?
No, so with federal funding, the finance committee does not need to have a vote.
They don't need to have a vote, however, they are the finance committee, and they do have a say in financial matters in the town, right?
Not on federal grants.
I think on all monies within the town, they can have a say or have a say. So.
I'd be happy to notify the finance committee that we are making these
Recommendations?
allocations. I do think
have a
that.
new chair and vice chair tonight.
That's right. I do think it's important that we notify them, and certainly, we'll keep them abreast of the utilization of.
I'd just like to see town representation when it comes to financial decisions for the town. When administrators making decisions and there's no representation, that makes me a little bit uncomfortable. I would personally like to hear them say, yay or nay, or I'm sure they're gonna say, sure, they like to raise their hand and spend money, but that's my comment on that.
So I'd support it. As I mentioned, this was originally coming out of the idea that we were doing the same for all the unions in their contracts, and it just seemed like the fair thing to do is to treat non-union staff. They, were not certainly immune to the pandemic, and stress has certainly impacted their jobs and lives during that time. So I think it just made sense to do this, and so I fully support it. I'll also just add with what Amy had said that, I had a conversation with the finance director. I asked to make sure that there was an amount for the town administrator, despite his not wanting that or requesting it. But I think that he certainly is included in this group of town employees who have been impacted by the pandemic and also deserve that compensation. So that's included in this amount that you see here tonight. I just wanted to say that clearly at this meeting as well, just because I think it's important to say that up front, and that's why that's in there.
Can I ask about the union employees who received ARPA funds? Was that brought before the finance committee?
That was voted on by the finance committee. There were collective bargaining contracts that included the utilization of those funds.
Yeah, that was part of their overall collective bargaining.
That was Article 4 at town meeting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Got it. Thank you. Sorry.
Yeah, I echo Neil's sentiments, and I support the use of ARPA funds in this scenario.
Any further questions or discussion? I'd entertain a motion of approving the recommendation for the use of ARPA funds for this purpose.
I don't think that we take a vote. The spending of ARPA funds is under the town administrator and the accountant. We have to take a vote on it?
Yeah, we were advised by Eric Kinchef, the CPA, that this should be voted on by the select board.
Okay.
I have a draft motion in my report that simply says motion to authorize $413,394 as outlined in ARPA payments for Swampscott municipal workforce. And it just breaks down.
Okay. Motion to authorize $413,394 as outlined below in the ARPA payments for Swampscott municipal workforce as follows: Public Works, $40,000; Police Union, $175,644; Administrative Professional Union, $15,000; Fire Union, $80,000; Non-union personnel, $103,500.
Just that number, David, was 102,752.
Oh, 102,750.
Yeah, we made a reconciliation.
As amended.
Under non-union?
As a non-union personnel, yeah.
Is there a second? I can't second anything, so.
Yeah, no. I would like to table the motion until FinCom can have a recommendation on the funds.
I would second that.
I mean,
On the table, I'm not, I want to hear what Finance Committee,
is there a deadline that we need to be aware of for these funds?
I don't believe any imminent deadline.
No, we have until June 30th, 2024 to obligate these funds.
Yeah, I just want to make clear that I'm in full support of paying these individuals, or compensating these individuals who have worked tirelessly and at personal risk through a pandemic. I think that's incredibly important. I see the point of running it through FinCom. When's the next FinCom meeting?
There isn't one scheduled.
They're meeting tonight, and, they typically,
They're already done, they're very prompt at ending.
No, they're going to have another meeting pretty quickly because they have to do a shuffle.
Got it.
So typically
It's gonna be quick.
I mean, I think there's an important distinction to be made that this is essentially approval of federal funds for use that doesn't impact the budget.
It doesn't impact the budget, however, it does impact finances.
It's similar to approving the use of a grant. And I don't think FinCom needs to approve the use of every grant that we accept as a town. That's the select board essentially who does that. And so that's how I view it. It's not a budget matter. I understand it has to do with money. I get it. But it is different in that way. It's the same way that the select board can accept a federal grant and it doesn't have to be reviewed or approved by FinCom. That's essentially what we're doing here. But that's how I view it. Again, I can't second it. A member's not here to second it. So we can revisit it after they review it if that's what.
We would, send the Finance Committee an update. We can give them a breakdown of the opera funds. I just think, it might be weeks, it might be some time, and frankly, I do think town staff have worked hard, and I think, this would be the last group of employees that, would and should receive some type of recognition for the work that they've done on behalf of the town through extraordinary times. I certainly understand the updating the Finance Committee and keeping them abreast, but we are authorized to expend these dollars for these purposes, and certainly, we would ensure that, the Finance Committee has every detail associated with the financial reporting of these dollars.
So, I mean, I'm not sure exactly what to do. We can have a motion to, anyone can make a motion that they want. I can't make a motion. And I can't second a motion. So people can make whatever motions. I would recommend making a motion for approval, and approving it tonight and let the process happen so that we can have these funds used for that purpose, just as we have for all the union employees. But if someone else wants to make another motion, they can, or else we can just move on to the next item.
I think I made a motion that Mary Ellen seconded.
To table it.
So a motion to table this until our next meeting, and the Finance Committee
Sends along their recommendation.
That's essentially the same thing as not.
Yeah,
It's the same thing, so let's just move on.
Okay.
So we can take a vote on that motion to table. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? No?
No.
Okay, so essentially we're moving on.
We're moving on.
So we're gonna have to move on, and we'll revisit it at our next meeting. I think if you can just make sure that that's on the agenda for the Finance Committee,
Mhm.
and if they can meet as soon as possible, that'd be really helpful. All right, I think that is all that's on our, other than the consent agenda. Now I can't find my agenda at all. There it is. Consent agenda is essentially approving minutes. I think we already approved the May 25th minutes, but just wanted to make sure, for redundancy's sake, that
Move it
it
again.
was the revised ones. They were revised. I looked at least the revisions that I knew of, but then approving the minutes from June 7th, June 14th, and June 15th meetings, as well as a vote to grant permission for the Shabbat of the North Shores 5K run on December 18th, 2022. So they're definitely taking care of business. Getting ready for the winter run. So if I have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. And with that, I think there's, I don't know, Sean, if there's anything in the town administrator's report that we haven't covered already tonight?
Let's see. No, we just have end-of-year shuffle that's coming out this week. We are, want to thank everybody that helped coordinate for our Pride celebration and Juneteenth celebration, and certainly a lot of great activities, for 4th of July. So please be sure to check out the fireworks.
Okay, great. Select board time.
Sure. I just want to thank Swampscott Recreation Director Danielle Strauss and her team for having an incredible weekend last weekend. Harbor Fest on Saturday and the Strawberry Festival on Sunday were two incredibly well-attended, well put together events, and certainly excited about the upcoming fireworks festival this Sunday. It's $5 cover at the door for adults. The veterans will be selling beer and 50/50 raffle tickets. So please come out and support the veterans. And then on the 16th of July, we'll be having our third Bentwater Day at the beach on Saturday, July 16th, with the proceeds to benefit the Fish House. A lot of good stuff happening.
Thanks. Anyone else have anything for select board time?
Yes, I want to mention two things. One, that the 50/50 raffle at Bentwater will benefit Hadley,
Yep.
PTO. And two, I want to acknowledge something that we did right this weekend, which was there was concerns at the Strawberry Festival about accessibility, and concerns were voiced, and the rec department and David and the folks who are handling that were able to make adjustments to make, hopefully, the next events that happen around Town Hall more accessible to folks. So I just want to commend you all for listening to the residents and having quick action, because we do have a lot of events happening, and so it's nice that we didn't, in the midst of all the chaos, we still took the time to say, okay, how can we improve, even though it's on the cusp of occurring. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure our residents do too.
So I want to thank Dr. Friedman for another successful rabies clinic. Takes a lot of time out. He's really wonderful. Also, the DPW has staff there to help people out. I also spoke with the chair of the school building committee, and she wanted to assure me that to have everyone double check the website, that it is up to date as far as the timing on what's going on with the new school as far as demolition and blasting. I'd like to get information soon. Maybe you could get information on what's happening with the veterans lease. I know that's come up a couple times. If maybe the next meeting we could get that out there. And also, I'd like to start to address the big blue bargains. I've gotten a lot of calls on that, and if we could get that up there onto the agenda or whatever we have to do to see what's going on with that? I mean, I don't, my understanding was there was an RFP before, they were involved in an RFP, they didn't get into something, so
Yeah.
maybe we can get something going.
Sure, just really quickly, yeah, they were involved with an RFP at 86 Burl Street in conjunction with Anchor Food Pantry. There was only room for one. Anchor Food Pantry was selected, and we have been exhaustively looking for additional space in the schools, outside of the schools. It's just been incredibly difficult to find the space. We think there is a solution once the new school comes online with the portables
Yeah.
at the Clark School. So that's really the brief update, but I agree, we should continue to look, because I do think it feeds into a number of initiatives in town, such as solid waste reduction and support for school and school programs.
Great.
I just want to mention along those lines that, I mean, that's certainly something that we have been involved in and should be discussing, but you're talking about school property, and so that's the school department and school committee. I mean, that's their conversation, and Big Blue Bargains, those funds go to the schools, and so it's certainly something that the schools need to be part of. I mean, we were part of the RFP process for the reuse of the old police station, so that certainly it got us involved, and it's not that we're not interested, and I'm not saying we shouldn't discuss it, but I just want to mention that there are other
entities.
That need to be part of that as well. So I don't have anything else on select board time, so I certainly would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, everyone, for sticking around tonight. Thank you, Joe. And everyone have a good night.
Good night.